John, thank you for coming out on the podcast, man.
Man, Mike, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Man, you just came in, you flew in from California, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing. So you're working out of California, and now you're officially retired. You've been retired almost a year now?
About a year and a month. Yeah, it was December of 2018.
So how has retirement life been so far? Because it's been hectic, man. I've seen you all over social media, all over the place.
It's been awesome. It's been different.
Yeah.
And I'm sure as you can relate, when, leaving 28 years of being a law enforcement officer, a game warden, and then 15 of that in special operations, running with a high-speed, low-drag team, I was afraid of hitting that wall and what was going to happen next, and very fortunately for me, with the new book and with the message that's so nationally important on a bunch of different levels, it's been like I really didn't leave work. I just kind of changed, what my role is in phase 2, and that's really to send a message and educate and teach and not be operational anymore. So,
man, I never even thought about it that way. The transitional stuff, we commonly talk about on the podcast with military people,
right?
But it is common in the first responder world of having transitional issues from going 100 miles an hour in what you do, and then you're in phase 2 and you have to figure it out. Have you had any difficulties with picking up the pieces and starting over again?
A little bit. Like I've been really lucky since the book's been so successful, and I've been so busy around that, and stuff that was kind of developing, the last 10, 15 years of my career was outreach was, one of my fortes. It was one of my, roles I was assigned in the new team, was to educate as well as run the team and operational missions and, training and development and all of that. But I kind of hit that wall for a couple of weeks, because there was kind of a backlash before things really got, ripping. And one thing that was so weird, and this was almost like indoctrinated behavior, and, psychologically, you don't even know it, but for 28 years, I had 2 trucks, a patrol truck, a government ride, that was all pimped out for off-road that I took home.
Free gas,
which was cool.
Yeah.
But, we take our trucks home. We work out of our houses. We don't go to a district field office as game wardens.
Your base station for commo, you check in, everything is from the house, right?
Yeah, we check in from the house. I mean, we have a dispatch center and we have regional offices all over the state of California, but the truck goes home. You have your computer, your internet, your phone, so you're accessible to your district quickly, and you're embedded and living somewhere within your patrol area of operation. But I had 2 trucks, I had 2 cell phones, private and my government cell phone, and then I had 2 computers, and I turned all that in, had the last camp out with the snipers and the Met team. We'd had a big send off. It was emotional, it was epic, next phase, and I'm driving away in my personal truck with 1 phone, and I'm like, I feel freaking naked. And no joke, Mike.
Wow.
I woke up in the middle of the night. I still do, even a year later.
Looking for your phone?
Like this panic. I'll have dreams that I've left equipment behind. Or, my thing was always be on time, be early, running the team. So there's always that. Sometimes I get those dreams where I'm missing streets and I'm running through an alley and I'm not getting where I need to get on time and about to miss an operation or something critical.
Yeah.
And then I can't find my shit.
Wow.
And so, that literally happened like 2 nights ago. And I went to grab for 2 phones. What happened to that second phone? What did I miss?
There is no second phone.
There was no second phone. I'm kind of a semi-free agent now, but it doesn't, I still feel very, it's a part of me, just like you would, with your SF career, man. It's hard.
You can't do anything for 28 years and not have, a lot of people, I love it because in the military, when you get out and people hear the stories of you being in the military, they immediately associate trauma, but it's just patterns. Right. I mean, it's like when you're working a specific kind of pattern, and then you're brought out of that or pulled out of that pattern, and then you're a free agent, kind of just doing your own thing. It's weird, man. It's weird at first.
It is, and it's it's got some of my teammates, SEAL team veterans that were now game wardens on the unit, and guys from domestic law enforcement, special ops and stuff. But some of my closest friends that we'd spent 25 years together, in the patrol phase of our job before we got the special ops team built, about 10 to 14 days into retirement. I'm still keeping in touch with, these are my brothers, but I finally start getting those calls like, hey, how you doing? I'm fine. Why? What's going on? How's the team? Just checking on you. Just because they know. I mean, I was a rat on crack as a team leader. And just happy and blessed to be doing what I was doing my whole career. Like you, I track your amazing career on Mike Ritland's
I
Mike
appreciate
Drop
it. That was a good
podcast.
podcast. Mike's such a good dude.
Man.
I love Mike.
You guys went so far down the rabbit hole, and I thought, I can't wait to talk to Mike Squared here because seeing what your career was all about, my same question to you was, how was that transition? You got into it on Mike's a little bit, but it was tough.
Super difficult. And people don't, I mean, especially with these career fields, and we'll get into it here in a second, but you were like a Green Beret for the warden side, right? For the fish and wildlife side, where, you're operating in a very semi to non-permissive environment where things could go bad really quick. So the elevated status of how you operate, where you have to remain vigilant and on point all the time, can exhaust you. And when you're doing it, especially for operationally, when you're doing it for so long, you get into a rhythm where it's supposed to be red, amber, green, right? You're supposed to have a down cycle, but you never really do have a down cycle. You're always in it. Even when you're not in it, you're thinking about it. So it's almost like you're emotionally there, at least. And then just to step away from it completely. I wanted to ask you, because how has the community treated you ever since the release of the book? Because, this is a completely different and so justified means of media and conversation, because it's on everybody's mind now, and to hear the truth in the context of somebody who's experienced it for 28 years needs to be told. But how has the community received it?
It's been amazing. The community on all levels have really received the message well. And, like I talked about on Joe Rogan's show especially, obviously I'm going to relate to guys like you, guys that have a special forces background, military or law enforcement, that regimented, 10, 20, 30 years, whatever we did. And always for the mission to protect this country, external and internal issues, and for me, environmental stuff. But with Joe and with some others like it, you don't have that military background, but you have more of a wider reach with some of the left versus some of the right. And like you've said on your podcast, and like what I like about Joe and how I feel personally is I'm an issue by issue guy. And, we talked a little bit about this before the show. I hate the divisiveness we have going on with the left and the right.
So toxic,
I certainly lean a little right, given my background, but I stay relatively open-minded because we are a people and we need to stay unified as a people, because there are internal and external threats. And I've dealt with so many internal threats to our environment, our public safety, and really just eroding, the public health of our country, that we can't be looking both sides. We got to be unified a little bit. So we've had very positive response from anybody that I've talked to this about, whether it be a podcast format. I speak all over the country on it, and not just to law enforcement or military groups, but animal rights groups, cannabis, activist groups, you name it, legislatures, high school kids, all over the board. And when we developed the marijuana enforcement team, our specialized unit, as the team leader developing it, and as the lieutenant, 30% of my job besides operational stuff was to do outreach, education. And, that was a lot of years of doing that. And I'm real passionate about it. I still enjoy talking about it. And, sometimes, you think, would you get tired of telling the same story or updated versions of the same story? And, I can honestly say no. It's really important, and people respond well, because it doesn't matter where we sit on the political spectrum, whether we've been, operational and law enforcement, first responder, or military veteran. Everybody resonates with this message because it's pro-American. It's a humanitarian message overall.
It's a story of truth. It's not like there's an agenda, hidden agenda that's leaning one way or the other.
Exactly.
Let's get into the beginning of the story, because I kind of want to hear. I'm really interested to hear your background and what made you out of high school, and you went to college as well. Wanted to be a game warden in the state of California. Like, where did that venture or that bug begin?
It was an interesting development that didn't come naturally. There was a little bit of intervention. I'll get to that in a minute on how the story goes. But when I was growing up, I was going to follow in my uncle's footsteps and be a civil engineer. I like to draft, I like to design, I like to be in the outdoors, and I thought dams, hydrology, things like that. The other thing is myself and my three siblings kind of, my mom called us and dad called us their wolf pack. We were outdoor kids, and we grew up without a lot of resources. There were a lot of poor, hard years there, and I was the first to go to college in the family. And my thing was, I need to make a decent enough living and a successful career that I can pay it back to the family, pay it forward and not be without. Because we had a lot of years of going without. There were some tough times, but tough times make us tougher, know? And I wouldn't change that given what has happened. So I never even met a game warden. I got my hunting license and passed hunter education at 9 years old with my dad's help. And, he was a champion trap and skeet shooter, back up on the Olympic team, a state champion in California back at the time,
nice.
And just an innately amazing shooter. It ran in my family on the Noress side. Granddad, career Navy, dad, Army, then National Guard, then, competitive shooter. So we grew up with that. We grew up, shooting 22s and air guns early on. I got the hunter safety. I was loving it. I just loved being in the outdoors. Loved sunrises on a duck hunt. Started a deer hunt, when I was of age to do that. And I was blown away by the freedom and the energy and just the beauty of everything going on out there.
Yeah.
And, to quote,
and this is NorCal.
This is all NorCal at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what people don't realize, I'm originally from the Silicon Valley of California, and you think, oh my gosh, the tech capital of the world. It's just like LA. It's just hustle and bustle. The politics are crazy. But like we talked about before the show, and you get 10 to 15 miles east or west of the valley.
Yeah.
And there's some of the most
beautiful,
remote, unhiked trails right now that are still hunted, legally under conservation models on private land. There's all this open space. And I still go back to California, being a Montana resident now with my non-resident tags and licenses, and go have as good a time as I do in Montana or anywhere else.
Yep.
It's still there. And that was the input. So I'm tracking along to be an engineer. I'm grinding away at high school. I'm working a couple of jobs. I'm in the outdoors all the time. I'm, backpacking, dumb kids learning to survive off grid with bad equipment, all that kind of good stuff. Like
the good times.
The good times. Yeah. And I'm about a semester into the engineering program at San Jose State. And it's a winter break. We're on the semester system, so we have this 5-week winter break. And my ex-brother-in-law, I call him my brother outlaw. I've known him since second grade. He's my Baja racing partner on dirt bikes and quads and stuff, and just been buddies and family forever. He's got a pack horse, and we're backpacking in Henrico Park for our winter break. So I leave finals, and I don't go party for the 4 weeks. I go straight to the mountains with my buddy, and we're going to go on like this 90-mile round-trip hike after a 7-day window, dead of winter. No one's in the park. My kind of adventure, right? Yeah. Your kind of adventure. Just awesome. And all those years hunting, I had never met a game warden. They'd never checked me in a camp. They never checked me and my dad or anyone else I was with, even fishing, loved to angle, trout fishing and stuff. So I didn't even know the job existed. So I'm going along this career path and not really feeling it, to be honest. And we're 13 miles into the backcountry after hiking all night to find this lake we've never been to in a downpour. We're soaking wet. We've got old, not very breathable equipment. And we have an illegal fire to start drying stuff out the next day. And early the next morning, I hear the compound load transfer case of this 4x4 truck just winding down this mountain to get to us. And like, wow, what's that? Rangers come here, back here this far? Because we're in deep. And it was a game warden. And he's patrolling that backcountry area because that's when the black-tailed deer hunting season is over, but all the trophy bucks are in this area, and guys will go in and maybe poach them and take them out of season, for that big trophy rack. And they thought we were probably a poaching camp. We're just dumb kids hiking.
Yeah.
And so he finds out we're, innocent but stupid.
Yeah.
And I go, what do you do? And I kept him there for 2 hours. And I'm asking him all these questions. And he's, oh, yeah, we're wildlife. We're law enforcement. We have jurisdiction everywhere to do everything cops do. But our emphasis is protecting wildlife, enforcing these laws. I'm like, where's your backup? He goes, well, there is no backup. I'm by myself. It's all what I can, I'm going to think myself through. I have an array of weaponry. I'm equipped to live out of this truck for 5 days if I get stuck on a case or a breakdown or whatever. And you're your own backup most of the time. And I went, wow, I lost it, man. I was just wound up for 4 days. And
how exciting.
Oh, yeah. And my brother, Jeff, was just like, oh, I can see your wheels turning. This is going to be an interesting trip. So the second we got out of the woods, I went to the criminal justice department, a different division at San Jose State. And unbeknownst to me, it was one of the best criminal justice schools in America.
Oh, wow.
Lucky me. And I said, what do I got to do to be a game warden? Do I need a degree to be a cop? What's it going to take? And they go, oh, yeah, we place game wardens, FBI, guys go to the military. We have an ROTC program, all of it. I changed my major that day.
Wow.
So I was only in the engineering school for 6 months. And then come spring of that first semester, this would have been 86, 87, I was off to the races to get a degree and be a game warden. And I, 4 years later, not too long out of between my undergrad and graduate work at State, I got the call, and it was just to the races.
Wow. And you, as a game warden, you are a federal law enforcement agent, and you have to go to FLETC, or is that?
It's a little different. So, Mike, to be a game warden in California, we're directly under the department, under the Interior Resources. So we work directly for the governor's office at the state level. So we go to a state police academy somewhere in California.
Okay.
But we are federally deputized as well to enforce federal regulations and Lacey Act interstate violations with like U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, work with Forest Service a lot, BLM, any of the national groups as well. But at the time, We had our own Fish and Wildlife Academy for Game Wardens at Napa Valley College, right next to their police academy.
Yeah.
But it was one of the first true Game Warden specific academies where they weren't throwing Game Warden candidates in with regular police academies. So that was cool. And I was from
So
resource.
it's completely separate.
It's completely separate, but you cover all the same stuff.
Yeah.
And what people don't realize is the training required for a game warden beyond what a standard law enforcement officer has to take is a little more arduous, because we're sworn peace officers for everything in California, everything that highway patrol, your state troopers here in Arizona, police department, sheriffs. We have to do all of that training, pass all of that. And then now we're up to about 8 or 9 weeks of fish and game specific advanced training before we go to our districts and start a field training officer program and go through that. So, and that's all wildlife forensics, skinning, gutting, tracking. I got roped into teaching a FieldCraft school, basically we call it a covert surveillance or a Code 5 school, where I took my time as a game warden and then the time as a sniper and later a sniper instructor. And we teach these newer generation kids being game wardens how to camo up, how to build ghillie suits, how to crawl into position and make observations.
Yeah.
We do a classroom on it, and then we do a scenario where, just like from sniper school, I'm sure you'll relate to this, me and a partner, Marcos, as he's identified in the book, we'll let them go out in a big wooded field as part of Butte College, where our academy is now. It's an amazing class. And they'll have a couple hours to set up in teams. And then we'll go out a couple hours later, we'll set up the big optics, and we'll pick apart their hides and see if we find any of them. And we'll do certain overt acts, that they got to document and they got to go through it. Then we'll debrief each team. And I got to admit, man, those kids are good quick.
Really?
Even the younger generation, millennial X generationers that haven't had a lot of outdoor experience, just because they have so much fun doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, they're rough around the edges like any FieldCraft school when you start. But we usually would only catch, we might have 7, 8 teams out there, 5, 6 to a group. And they're no more than 200 yards out, 150 yards, sometimes closer. And they've just blended their layer of vegetation. They've arranged their camo right. They've made the sun levels where they need to be. And we might catch 1 or 2 most classes.
Wow.
So I was really impressed to see the next generation doing a good job. And then then the next morning we go out there and do a big poaching scenario, and they got to take us down and undetected. And it's a fun little evolution.
So that's the basic training.
That's basic.
Wow. So you guys, on top of all the other duties that you have to do as a sworn peace officer, you have to do the extra stuff of FieldCraft and everything else, because your job specifically is operating in remote, austere places where nobody else is.
Right.
How many sworn? Because the name has changed, right? It used to be Fish and Game.
Yep.
And now it's what? Wildlife.
Fish and Wildlife.
Fish and
the
Wildlife.
California Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Yep.
Previously, California Department of Fish and Game. And the game part of the title was kind of misnomer with some of the politics and changing sentiment in California for a multitude of reasons. It went to wildlife, but game comes from the hunting side of it.
Yep.
Legal, ethical conservation that we in the agency support. We all come from that background, and we want to see it thrive.
Yeah.
And in California, we are losing hunters, annually. It's just happening, unfortunately. But fortunately, the title of the position is still Game Warden. And I prefer it. I like it. And that's the dinosaur in me. Yeah. But the other term we have is wildlife officer, which is the other title of what our job is. And, you see game wardens called conservation officers, wildlife officers, game wardens, a lot of different combinations. But I go kind of old school, and we call it game warden. So
where does the ranger fit into the picture? Like if you have a ranger that's rolling around, is he dedicated to BLM or National Forest?
It kind of depends. A ranger for, say, U.S. Forest Service is responsible for his entire forest and any national forest, federal land, public land. But he's enforcing not just wildlife violations; he's doing everything. Illegal campfires, felons with weapons on the property, timber harvest issues, trespassing issues, border disputes, cattle grazing violations, or making sure things like that are going smoothly. So a ranger has a lot of challenges outside of just the focus that we as game wardens have. But what you will find is you'll find us working hand in hand. I mean, some of the best people we've worked with are dedicated rangers on Forest Service for some of the special operations, drug cartel stuff. Yeah. With some of this tainted cannabis stuff. I mean, it was a U.S. Forest Service ranger, a law enforcement officer, LEO, not far from Temecula, Riverside County, from an area we both know in California where I started my career, that really exposes to me on his forest of seeing these grow sites for the first time, when the whole the cannabis cartel thing started in California way back about the time I started my career. So they have that big thing to tackle. So they don't get as much time to just focus on, the wildlife violations, where we do. I mean, that's our target, and outreach education and directly stopping those poaching crimes and those wildlife water losses and crimes like that is what we do.
How many game wardens would there be per square mileage? I mean, you guys are responsible for a lot, right?
We cover a lot of ground, and you hear me talk a little bit, quite a bit actually, about the thin green line, and the thin green line being the thin green line of conservation officers, rangers, military, border patrol. We all use the thin green line flag. It's kind of become part of my brand. I'm passionate about that part of it because the thin green line truly hasn't been any thinner when you look at the number of game wardens compared to the population of the country. It just skyrocketed. And, in my first book, War in the Woods, we did, toward the end, in the afterword, we had basically a matrix, if you will, that had the number of game wardens in each state, the total number of game wardens in the country, and then the population and all the impacts that are slowly growing in our wildlands. And Hidden War comes out almost ironically not planned this way, but a decade later. What demographic has changed in the country? And we've gained about 700 or 800 game wardens nationally with all the states combined. You could imagine what the population has done in America in a decade. And how many more heinous crimes like what we're getting into to talk about today, amongst other things, have increased. So the thin green line's getting thinner. And to put it in perspective, when I went to special ops, we were a dedicated fire team like you guys were, in special forces, and we were running around as a unit all the time. But when I was a patrol lieutenant or a warden, even before that, I was responsible for 200 square miles or maybe more, of South Santa Clara County. And there was one other game warden, Mark, to the north, that was my San Jose partner. And there were always 2 vacancies because you couldn't keep people in the Bay Area because of cost of living. We couldn't hire people fast enough to fill the void. So our districts were double what they were supposed to be, and they were still overwhelming. So, it's thin. And there's definitely still a shortage, even though we've gained some bodies, and we've gained some salary, and we gained some legitimacy through teams like the Met, our special ops team, the wildlife trafficking team, specialized units, and what all the good work the patrol folks are doing and the Marine folks are doing. We're still vastly understaffed.
Yeah, and that's kind of where this almost all started from, because the remoteness, the austere environment, and then you're not just dealing with conservation issues, enforcing hunting laws. You run into these illegal grows for the first time that involved some of the most dangerous, organized crime organizations in the world. How does that start? Because you said it happened in the beginning. Is there a specific moment in which that started?
It was really interesting because when I was a pup, a brand new game warden in Riverside County, and I was only down there. I went to the academy in 1992. It was like February to about June, July, or somewhere in August there. Did the FTO program, and I got sent to an area I was completely unfamiliar with, and it was Western Riverside County, Temecula, Murrieta, Lake Elsinore. When I got down there, I wanted to just be the best game warden I could. I wanted to hit the ground running. I wanted to bust spotlighters, guys, spotlighting deer at night and doing all that kind of stuff, people taking too many fish, and get, hardcore poachers taking all of our wildlife in these remote areas. And I did a lot of that, and that was a heck of a training ground, man, because it was a Wild West down there. I mean, by far, 10 times the amount of poaching, heinous poaching I saw in Southern California than I did when I got back to the Silicon Valley. So the learning curve was quick. But I remember I met a really cool Forest Service LEO that was ex-Border Patrol, military background, named Travis Tippett, lifelong friend ever since. And he was a fairly new ranger for the Cleveland National Forest right there that borders Camp Pendleton, the Marine Corps Training Center. And we met up one night, and I saw him work in the valley. And I haven't told this story, I think, anywhere in any public forum. Awesome. But this is kind of cool one because I'm watching him cruise through his valley below, and I'm on this overwatch. I found this real, strategic overwatch to watch the whole valley where I could sneak down, bust anybody if they're spotlighting deer. And I see this slow rolling vehicle running through, and he's lighting up some things. I'm like, I got my first spotlighter. I've only been down here a month. I'm going to make my reputation, really, really, man, make the lieutenant all happy, prove myself. Because that was the thing, you come behind the ears. That was the big crime, is getting an armed guy at night. That was the big case to get. And I go sneaking up behind him, and, we had the sneak lights on our trucks. We ran blacked out. We didn't have MVGs yet, so we're just, kind of roguing it. But I'm creeping along behind him, and I light him up. And then he lights me up. I'm like, uh-oh. This is another law enforcement brother. What am I doing? I blew this one. Felt stupid. He gets out. He's under my spotlight. He's like, hey, I'm Forest Service. I'm like, I'm Fish and Game. How you doing, Warden Noress?
Friendly forces
Officer
coordination.
Tippett. So we start having a conversation.
Yeah.
Shut our lights down. Where are you from? How'd you get here? Blah, 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 blah. I find out he's a long-range shooter. He's a predator hunter. He wants to learn to hand load. I've been a precision hand loader of ammunition, since I was like 14.
Yeah, as a kid with your dad growing up.
With dad growing up, and that was it, make the most accurate stuff. And I didn't quite know at that point when I met Travis, but that was actually going to start my desire to get into special operations on some level, whether it be military. Now I'm in a domestic law enforcement, outdoor, wildlife protection group that I really love. And they were starting to work these drug trafficking organization, these cartel grow ops from these guys out of Mexico, actually in that forest around that time. That's when they were first kind of coming across the border and finding all this open country that they could just make this tainted cannabis and multi-million-dollar black market ops go hot and heavy. So he had 3 or 4 gardens actually operating in their forest, and they were working them with drug task forces and with Forest Service LEO teams to go raid them and get them out. And he invited me on one. And, I was really naive. I was really, really juvenile on the camouflage and the FieldCraft, but did the best I could, went in on a raid with them. Hiked into this thing. It was probably a 4-mile, pretty good hump, no trail, very loose trail in places. And I saw the encampments and the bunks and the camouflage and punji pits and, these massive marijuana plants. And we didn't know at the time, all those EPA banned, carbofuran poisons were on them.
What?
Actually on the cannabis that's going out into the black market. And I dive into that in the new book especially. But when I saw that, I went, these are flashbacks to Vietnam.
I was just thinking Vietnam. I was like,
this is straight up Vietnam.
Patrol
base. Brushy,
yeah.
It was like jungly areas. And, at the time, nobody was catching any bad guys. The tactics were really early. And then ironically, we just really hit it off. And he said, you want to go on more raids? I said, yeah, I want to check this out. I don't know if it's really in my MOS, if you will. It's not protocol for a game warden to do this, but we're a force multiplier. They're as thin as we are. As far as, Forest Service Rangers, they cover bigger territory than we do. And then he said, well, hey, we have some training coming up. And it's a 3rd Special Forces Green Beret group that are doing land nav, and they're doing open field movement and camouflage and FieldCraft. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm going to train with SF? I'm a brand new game warden in Temecula in my first house. I'm like, I'm in. So your guys actually, from your background and your old unit,
that's so crazy,
were actually training us for weeks at a time, and they couldn't go in obviously and do any domestic operations, but they could be on the fringes. They could set us up on how to do LPOPs.
Yeah.
I was learning all of that, and I'm like 22 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is the direction I want to go. And I didn't know it at the time, but the switch had flipped inside that I needed to get a tactical level of proficiency ahead of the game, because I just kind of had this sense that 10, 20 years down the road, the progressive evolution of what game wardens are going to have to deal with is going to get way Western than catching an illegal fisherman or a guy spotlighting at night. It's going to get crazy. When I saw those cartel grows, and then things really ramped up when I got to the Silicon Valley.
So are the Rangers, do they already have a special operations team at that time, or are they like just slowly evolving it, slow rolling like you guys were?
Yeah, it was a slow roll. They didn't have dedicated teams, but they would get Rangers from different districts. They'd bring them from other states, sometimes to do a marijuana operation on these trespass grow operations. But the training they were getting was kind of ad hoc and good stuff, like from, 3rd SF group coming in. That specific training was not only to make the Ranger career more effective, but really to kind of dial them in for missions like this.
Yeah.
But we weren't a formalized team. It was the same thing like when my first book covers that period from about 04 and then 05 when my partner was shot and almost killed in that Sierra Azul mission that was nuts.
Yeah.
Where we kind of, eyes open, how unprepared we were, what we needed to change to not let that happen again and to be more effective with combating these guys. It was the type of thing where we didn't have the blessing of a formalized unit within each agency, but we kind of gravitated the right guys that were the tacticians, the right guys, just like in an SF group that you're from, they gravitated toward specializing in it in the game warden field. in their districts, or in the sheriff's department from their SWAT unit, or their sniper background from the military, hunting background from, a park ranger, if you will. And then we would all come together because there just weren't enough bodies to do it safely. And Forest Service was doing the same thing. And they still are to this day. They're, in the states that it's most prevalent, mostly California, West Coast, but in other parts of the country as well. There's a certain number of law enforcement officers and supervisors and canine handlers at the federal level that are amazing, because they're specializing in it, even without a team, and they're just getting better by exposure.
Yeah. So in the beginning stages of this, it's a lot of ad hoc. They're just figuring it out you're figuring it out as you go.
Right.
So talk to me about, just because I want to always bring this back to survival and in the podcast. But what is your current capability at this point, which is pre-evolvement of understanding like what we're getting ourselves into? What's your capacity and capability? A truck, a gun? What kind of setup do you have?
Yeah, we're running in a patrol truck. At the time, they were all green or dark blue, and it's a 4x4. Some SUVs, mostly pickups, and we had. At this time, early on, when we're talking Riverside County days, we didn't have a delineated patrol rifle. It was an 870 shotgun, and it was 2 Glocks. And I was the first academy to get a semi-automatic pistol for the agency, when typically before that.
It was a wheel gun?
It was a wheel gun. It was a 686 Smith & Wesson 357.
Wow.
And when I actually got my loadout kit to get prepared for the academy on my Sam Brown, it was, get speed loader pouches, get a holster for a 686. And then I get to the academy, and I'm one of the youngest guys there off the civilian list, with a bunch of veterans and, or lifeguards and state park rangers that are lateraling over. And Greg Orr, who was a Vietnam veteran, amazing guy in Vietnam, and had a lot of loss there, a lot of combat experience. And he's my TAC officer, and he's going to kick our asses, no pun intended. He was the guy we needed, and I needed at that stage of my young career, to elevate the level I needed to elevate. But he comes in with a Glock 22 40 cal in a Safari Land basket weave speed holster, and I went, what? That's that polymer gun my dad doesn't like because he's a 1911 guy and he's a combat Tupperware. It's a terrorist gun. It could defeat metal detectors. And I'm like, oh, and I was just getting into semi-autos at the time myself. But so we were the first agency that did what all the other agencies didn't do, because they didn't trust in the Glock system. They bought, like 4006 Smith & Wessons with a decocker.
They all got there at some point now.
They all got there,
years.
But our little old school agency that's not known for being that progressive at the time, because the right guys were on the statewide firearms committee, like Greg, like these, gun guys that were breaking tradition, and best thing we ever did.
Wow.
So I was in that first academy, fired the first shots with the Glock 40. So I had that as a duty gun, loved it. We had a Glock 27 subcompact as our backup off-duty concealed carry.
But 870, huh? You didn't have a rifle?
Not yet. We had a rifle. Our firearms policy allowed for a rifle, but it was any rifle if you qualified with it and could get an armor inspected. So some guys, Vietnam veterans, would have an M16A1 or an AR version, semi-auto.
Yeah.
Some guys would have Ruger Ranch rifles, the Mini 14, the GB version. Some guys would have 30-30 lever guns. Some guys would take their 270 Model 70 bolt action, and our qual course was it was 100 yards.
Yeah.
It was all, pretty accurate shooting. There wasn't any tactics involved in it. Now, fast forward, I started my second year in, I was already getting nominated to go to firearms instructor school at the FBI. I was around a lot of tactical types in Southern California, and I knew that was going to continue when I made it back home to the Silicon Valley. But I was seeing what the feds were doing. I was seeing what 3rd Special Forces were doing when they happened to be in the woods training us when I'm just a pup game warden at Riverside.
Awesome.
And I'm picking their brain on, you guys, I think they were just going to the M9 at the time. You guys were pushing Berettas and, M4s and things like that. Learning, optics were really, really fresh for you guys. And they were like, space age Star Trek stuff for us. But it paved the way. And then fast forward to, about early 2000s, right around 9/11, and when the global war on terror was about to start, we decided we needed a statewide issued patrol rifle. We needed to be uniform, we needed ammunition, we needed armor inspections, and we needed tactics. And we were a poor agency. So one of our chiefs involved in this firearms committee, Greg and the guys that I just mentioned, they had a connection through the DRMO program of military loaner stuff. And we got 144 mil-spec almost brand new out of the box M14s.
That's so amazing.
And I was the pup guy, the youngest guy on the firearms committee that had just been nominated to be a rep for the committee. And there's like, basically on our firearms committee, it was a real honorable place to be. It was, to get chosen for it was crazy. There was only one in each district, and there were 7 districts in the state. And you basically were a train the trainer. You brought all the new policies to the chiefs. You tested new weaponry, defensive tactics, ground fighting, all of our arrest and control. It was all of that. But I was coming on when the M14 was starting. So I got kind of pushed into spearheading that as the young guy to develop the training curriculum, how we were going to get these out to the field 20 at a time, and fell in love with the rifle, man. It was cool.
What a great rifle, right?
It was amazing, yeah. And I know you.
What year was that? What year?
That was 2003, 2004.
Wow. So that became the first patrol-wide rifle that you guys were issued.
That was the first battle rifle that was officially a Department of Fish and Game. It was Fish and Game at the time.
Yeah.
Our patrol rifle. And so all the trucks had to get retrofitted with electrolocks that would hold that big. They're all the 22-inch barrel variant, the mil-spec ones. They all were full auto capable, just the selectors pulled out. And super accurate, we did my background in hand loading and ballistics. I got roped in with the mentors, kind of the patriarchs on the
What ammo did you guys go with?
We ended up going with a couple different ones. We started with Hornady Tap, and it was just like a ballistic tip. It was a little too frangible, a little too rapid expanding for if we had to put down a big black bear or a mountain lion or anything really big. Unbeknownst to me, I ended up using my M14 in our first gunfight on a cartel grow in 2005 when my partner was shot. And I'm glad we were doing bonded bullets then to penetrate through, dirt and manzanita, stuff the 5.56s and all the M4 carbines that were being shot during that gunfight by my sheriff's office partners. Very few rounds were getting to the bad guys because of all the brush cover, the deflection, stuff we can go into based on that incident that we did a lot of forensic dissection on. But we ended up going to attack bonded federal load. Federal actually made a one-off load to our specs that later became the civilian fusion, federal fusion.
Oh, wow.
It was just basically like a Nosler AccuBond or any of these electronically bonded bullets, lead core to the alloy of the copper, but flash suppressant powders, nickel cases, low flash signatures, so they'd work in marine environments, desert environments, running the gun when it was dirty. And that is a great load, but we still run. We run that load because we have to penetrate big stuff. On the animal front, barricaded suspects, window glass, car doors does real well. Not really a CQB weapon, obviously, but we've adopted and changed things around for different loads for that on the new rifle that we've got now.
Well, your job, before we get into the cartel stuff, your job. What is a warden's job specifically in conservation and enforcement of the law? What is it? What do you guys do?
Yeah, we're sworn to do anything to protect wildlife, waterways, and wildlands. We enforce the Fish and Game Code, and it's called the California Code of Regulations, Title 14, which is everything environmental. Water code stuff, so water pollution from developments, oil spills, chemical dumps, we do it on that front. Poaching of wildlife, taking wildlife out of season, commercial wildlife poaching where, you got an organized group, say, diving for abalone off the California coastline.
Which is a huge problem.
Huge problem, yeah. And it's a multi-million-dollar industry of being sold on the black market illegally through restaurants, bear gallbladders, sturgeon roe and caviar, the eggs from certain fish. And now wildlife trafficking has really blown up because shortly after the marijuana enforcement team, our unit was built. It was mandated federally under the Obama administration that every fish and game organization in every state had to have a wildlife trafficking unit because of the ivory. The millions and millions of dollars of the ivory trade being, illegally imported into America and the Orient and all other countries. So rhino, elephant ivory, all that kind of stuff. We dabble in that very heavily.
And is that enforcement coming from overseas via ship? And landing in California specifically?
Yeah.
So you're just cutting it off?
We're cutting it off, and we're also interdicting it once it gets here illegally, and then it's trying to be sold in the black
distributed
market.
in the black market.
And we're infiltrating that black market, setting up takedowns, doing what we need to do on that. So marine enforcement, we have some state-of-the-art patrol boats that are 100 miles off the coast sometimes of Southern California.
Oh, wow. So you guys are in the waters as well.
We're in the waters a lot.
Oh.
And something that I go in the new book, and I have a few pictures of this, and ironically, we haven't talked about this in any forums, any other podcasts, and you just triggered a real good thought, Mike, is Our Met team have been integrating with our offshore patrol vessel teams, some of our best patrol boat guys, training them on interdiction. Like you're going out to board what you think is a lobster fishing boat, or it's a party boat off the coast, and it may be one of these cartel drug panga boats. Mast is a civilian boat to bring in loads of clandestine drugs, bring in people, smuggle guns. You just don't know. So the year I retired was a really cool year because I got to integrate with old boat buddies that were running great operations down on the Southern California coastline. And we integrated some amazing training. Our snipers, shooting on water on our floating target systems, overboard drills, small vessel engagements, skiff to skiff, doing all of that kind of stuff.
It's so funny because I'm having this vision of my old job in special operations where you have to be a jack of all trades. You have to do everything.
You do.
Right? Because you have to be good in the woods. You got to be good in the city. You got to be good on the water.
Yeah.
And then you have to be able to cross-train and then, whichever environment you're in, being able to adapt to that environment. And you guys have to be all of the above, right?
Yeah, and that's the fun of it, right? I mean, like from your SF days.
Sounds exciting.
when you got your, listening to your story,
which
is an amazing story, how you got to that point after all the great things you did in your career, and you got blessed with, okay, build the team you want to build.
Yeah.
The gloves are off. Get the equipment, the people, expand your capabilities to handle anything that you're going to need with a SIF team. We had the same deal with Met, except I was thinking, okay, it's going to be mostly a wooded team. California, we could be at 13,000 feet on the Mount Whitney side of the Eastern Sierras. We could be in the desert. We could be on the water's edge of the ocean. We could be in jungle like riparian redwood forests. We operated everywhere. So when we built Met, and then I built the sniper unit a few months after Met was formed, the cool thing was equipping and training all those environments, which we had never done before. So getting to go out with our boat guys. Okay, we're gonna do rappelling and mountaineering. So we're gonna go to the Mountain Marine Warfare Center off Sonora Pass, where all branches go for winter warfare, and also they're rappelling terrain and their ropes courses and stuff. And we started doing that, and people are like, well, why do you need to rappel? Because some of these places we're going to drop into are going to be really weird, and to set snipers on Overwatch at 12,000 feet, we may have to do that. And we have. Yeah. Getting our canines down cliffs, having them, not only in and out of choppers and, spy lining or short hauling with us, on a long line, but going down a rappelling rope or ascending up a cliff. We get the dogs doing all of that stuff, and then we're on the water. And, the water thing with the panga threat from the cartels and some of this offshore presence of this organized group versus just embedded inside our land, our domestic land borders, a little bit, it was eye-opening. And that was really starting to ramp up about the time Met started. So I went, oh man, this is going to be another challenge, but I got to take a breath. I got to get us good on the ground, the guys on the team.
Has to be built up proper.
Yeah, there was more to the job than we thought we'd encounter so quickly. But that was the challenge, and that was the fun of it. And thank heaven for having great guys. The guy that's now a captain of our, one of our cannabis units and oversees Met from an administrative level, retired 20-year veteran of SEAL teams, 9 years as a sniper, big outdoor guy. So Frog, as he's called in the book, and I won't say his real name because he's still operational, having experienced two amazing fabricators that are like MacGyver with a welding torch and can build anything. Shang and Tango, as they're called in the book. I needed a floating target system for doing these panga interdictions and sniper training off the vessel. And they made a modular system with steel, with paper targets. It floated out there, and other agencies and military guys are going, man, that thing's modular. You throw it in a boat, you break it down, you put it out 100 miles offshore, get swells, get
That's awesome.
Command fire drills.
Wish we had that.
I wish we did too, way
That's
years
crazy.
ago. But now just having that capability and getting two guys that can create, going to work in their shops. Oh, this is for work. But it's gonna be more than just building something. So yeah, we just fill and flow. That's our team's motto: fill and flow. Handle any challenge you got, put the right people in front of it. And as you know, with a top 1% team, it was so easy. Yeah. I could say, Tango, Shang, can you guys create this? I can build stuff. I'm not a welder like you guys are. Yeah, boss, we got this. And they just go to work and can I see, we're going to surprise you. And they just overdid it. And I was just proud. And and then on the back, they stenciled our emblem, on the pontoon on the bottom, and they put USSC and then -weed. And I'm like, That's cool. They're like, yeah, we just wanted to, we're not sure you'd like that. I go, that's great, man.
That's awesome.
Let's be innovative. So
That's
things
awesome.
like that, you know, but yeah, it was a lot.
Was poaching a big issue in California? Is it still an issue when you're a warden?
Surprisingly, it is.
Really?
You don't think of poaching in California being that big of a deal versus like maybe Arizona here with big mule deer or elk, or Montana, but no, it's huge. Wow. And what people don't realize about California, and this is it, California is full of a lot of great people, a lot of great resource, and some of the most diverse terrain in the world. I mean, you think of California being one of only 6 Mediterranean climates on the globe, and that's why cost of living is so high, and that's why, you know, it's such good weather year round to do so many good outdoor activities. It's also why it's a great weed state, which we'll get into a little later, why the cartel's embedded there. But knowing that, and knowing, I mean, you have mule deer, subspecies of the mule deer, the black-tailed coastal deer that I cut my teeth on and still love to hunt, wild hogs, turkeys, antelope. We have tule elk herds, every marine species you can imagine in the ocean. I mean, really more diverse than most other hunting states. And there's still hunting allowed for most all of those species. And still a, you know, percentage, it's not a lot, but there's still a lot of hunting going on in California. I still, you know, pay the big money I'm a non-resident in California now, so I pay for the expensive tags, and I get the home tags in Montana now. So there's a lot going on there. And we talk about the special operations focus of what our team's mission is, and it does not in any way negate the good work and necessary work that any of the other divisions are doing, because it's a thin green line, overwhelming task.
Yeah.
We just don't have enough bodies to check enough anglers to make sure it's getting done right. We don't have enough wardens to check all, you know, legitimate hunters are great. They're our allies, but you need to get those, you know, that 1% poacher, and they're hard to catch.
Wow.
And they're still getting away with a lot of wildlife crime that we're not catching. It's just the way the game works, unfortunately.
So this is standing up teams for special operations addressing a specific threat, and you're just out there, you're looking for these poachers. And then when is the first time that you start running across the frequency in cartel grows, and what does that look like?
It was 2004, and it was the first chapter of War in the Woods. The first book dives into this because I was working trout season opener really heavy in the Silicon Valley, because we have a lot of creeks that are still spawning steelhead channels that go all the way to the ocean. You still get migrating steelhead all the way into South Silicon Valley. Wow. Which are pristine fish, right? They're so limited on the West Coast. The feds price them at like $30,000 a fish.
Wow.
I mean, that's how limited they are, brother. So
that's insane.
When you look at that, I was, and loving trout and all fisheries, growing up as a fisherman and an angler as well as a hunter with my family, I was focusing on that. That's usually middle April, and we just dive in, and that's like a targeted thing we're doing. And then I got a phone call from codename GI in the first book, and he was a lifelong friend of my family. He was also a fellow San Jose State fisheries biologist graduate in his master's program, doing a study on steelhead trout vitality, frogs, and all these aquatics in a creek that came out of Henry Coe Park, where I met that game warden. So going full circle to this story, he calls me like one Saturday morning in April and goes, dude, we got some problems up on my study area. I've got 2 creeks, one up Dexter Canyon, one up this other canyon, and this one's flowing great, like it should, because it's April, so all the runoff, the streams are ripping. They're nowhere near summer dry. But in the left one, it's bone dry. There's debris and everything in the creek. I got dead fish. I got dead frogs. This is a huge, huge problem. Can we go check it out? I went, absolutely. We got to get up there and check it out, because I knew how sensitive the fishery was, and I knew how passionate he was, and he was a personal friend. So I throw him in the patrol truck, go to the top of the ridge, get behind the lock gate. I grab my backpack. I got my AR, basic, first aid supplies, not the good trauma stuff we had later, because this is 04. He's an unarmed civilian, and we dive down into the canyon from the top to try to find out what this water diversion is. And I'm thinking, Mike, this is going to be a cattleman taking water illegally, for his farm or for his cattle or something sedate. We dive into the canyon, and it's like a little mini Grand Canyon where the headwaters of this creek is, and we're about 2.5 miles from the bottom of where this thing started. It's a long creek. And we see visqueen plastic, collecting all the water where it's kind of dammed up. And then here's a water line, a diversion, the black polypipe water line going straight down the dry channel that's all dry below the dam they built. I'm like, that's pretty rudimentary, man. I've never seen a water diversion like that, but that sucks. That's a lot of dead animals below here. So, we go down the rabbit hole. We start tactically working down the creek bottom, trying to hug the edge to have, a little bit of concealment and cover. And as we go about 200 yards down that trail, I see 18-inch marijuana plants ahead of me on both sides of the creek. I'm like, oh, that's what this is for. And then a couple minutes later, we start seeing like a tarp, like a hooch, but all camouflaged and spray painted, tactically. Like I would camo my gear for a kit.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a farmer. That's not a rancher. This is weird. Then I see two Latin, two Hispanic guys in the BDUs with AKs, machetes, walking along the bottom of this farm, tending the plants a little bit, chopping some stuff up, digging holes around them, and kind of looking around, having no idea we're there, but situationally aware of this area like it was theirs. And I went, man, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Wow.
This just got Western. So my mind's reeling, and we're hugging this creek bank where it's an erosion cut, and they're coming right at us. And I've got my red dot on them, and I'm like, we getting a gunfight today? I got no cell coverage, I got no radio coverage, and I have an unarmed civilian with me.
Wow.
This is going to be a very, very bad day if this thing goes Western or this thing goes Winchester.
Mm-hmm.
And so they come around, they tend their plants, they look around, we got a concealment, I'm on them. And then they just start cutting uphill, and they double back and pucker factor. I took a deep breath. We made sure they got down. Nice thing about GI is very tactically sound. I mean, he's in that canyon by himself. That grow was being built and developed and was probably under his nose for years. Wow. And he's by himself up there all the time.
Wow.
We haven't even really addressed that before. So, and then we bust that big straight up climb, just heart pounding, but the adrenaline's going. I'm like, what did I just see? Who do I talk to? I got to talk to a narcotics group, task force guys doing this drug enforcement. I've never worked with this game warden, boom, boom. I saw this in Southern California Forest Service, never really did any more of it, got transplanted back home. That was about a 10-year gap. And then here I am.
Yeah.
It's in my backyard.
So you've seen grows before, but you've never seen grows being monitored by dudes in BDUs, AKs, that kind of thing, which is completely different.
Yeah, we had never seen bad guys in Southern California. They were there. They were armed the same way, guaranteed, and they had the same clothing because it's all the same kind of group of how they're set up. Now, granted, some are more aggressive than others, depending on what part of the state you're in, what cell they're working for, we've learned. But they're always armed at some level. They're always situationally aware. They know what they're doing is high on the felony scale. And, they're 95% are deportable felons that they're not legal immigrants they're from a cartel organization being transplanted here to do a job.
Yeah.
So they have a lot to lose.
Can you pin those guys as cartel? And does it change anything? Like if you rolled those two dudes up that evening or that afternoon, what were the laws back then? Had they changed? And then what would become of them? Would they go to prison in America, or would they just be deported?
They probably would have been deported at the time because they would have been identified as deportable felons. 9 times out of 10, growers like that are that armed have a pretty extensive criminal history. We find out in Mexico or in America under a fake ID.
You'll be able to see both if you identify who it is.
Yeah,
literally.
Yeah, we can ascertain all that if they've been identified, or we'll try to identify them in the system and reach out to other people that can identify them. And the problem with that was everybody was new to it because no one ever saw these guys. It was like a ghost when you got to these grow sites. Like in Southern California, in the late 90s or the early 90s rather, when I was going into those grows, I only got to go on 1 or 2 of them. But I remember talking to Travis and the other LEOs that they'd go in and the guys would be in escape tunnels. They'd bug out before anyone landed.
Wow.
The tactics just weren't honed. So they'd find an occasional gun maybe, but very few weapons even, because the weapons usually went with the bad guys. So there was never any urgency to the threat. It's just like, oh, wow, it's kind of a nomadic camp. Looks kind of like Vietnam, but no one's getting hurt. Let's just cut the plants. Let's get out of here. Mm-hmm. And then when I saw what I saw, I went, that's when the light bulb went off.
Yeah.
Fortunately for me, when I saw that threat, I realized, okay, a patrol game warden can't tackle this alone. He can't tackle it in a sheriff's-like uniform that we wear when we're on patrol out of our truck. We can't drive up to grow sites in our truck. This is going to be a deep woods operation. You're going to be cut off, whether there's 1, 2, or 10 of us, and we need to be tactically prepared. We need to be tactically prepared to take care of our own asses medically if someone gets shot, worst case, or breaks a bone or whatever. But we were light years from that. So that's when I started on that particular mission. 2 sheriff's deputies that are really, really motivated special ops guys that were guests on that mission we just became friends after that mission with everything we saw that wasn't done the way we liked it, especially environmentally and tactically, to catch guys, because we wanted to catch guys. And we started teaming up, and then that led into that first gunfight in 05 where Kyle was shot. And I happened to be with some great operators from the sheriff's office that, again, when you've been in battle like that, on your own soil, when you're looking down at Google and eBay and Facebook and the headquarters of the tech capital and getting in gunfights with armed cartel guys during harvest time, it didn't compute, but it brought home how serious this problem is, and that we were ill prepared.
All right, so let's get into the gunfight, because I want to talk specifics about this, and I've heard a couple of snippets of this, but I want to get into the Nat's ass details, because this is really what kind of set the precedent for, I'm assuming, for people outside of you to go, okay, maybe we're dealing with something different, because you knew what was going on because of your experience a year prior,
right?
But as this situation unfolded, and then the after action review and everything else, I'm assuming it helped blossom what became as the special operations element of that you're working.
It was like those back thoughts, the agency, I think politically and progressively wasn't ready for it. After the shooting, my chief at the time, Nancy Foley, who was a big supporter of what we were doing, she was very progressive. She kept us in this game even after a warden was shot, and we took a lot of political. We took some blast on that. But she asked me specifically when the first book came out, because it was while I was still employed, and it had to be, looked at by the agency and obviously blessed. And she was really about getting the book and the message out there for the first book. But during that conversation, when I announced I had a great book deal to tell this story the right way, she said, "This is great. What else do we need?" I said, "We need we need teams or a team dedicated to this, Nance, because what we're seeing is not an exception to what just happened with this gunfight. It's going to be the norm, or it's the potential for it to be the norm is there. Mm-hmm. I don't want to live these mistakes again. I don't want to go in with 3 game wardens and 3 sheriff's deputies with no contingency plan from our admin that don't know what bird can come into a hot zone to hoist us out." I mean, we had, after my partner was shot and he's down, and we set up a perimeter, and the bad guy that shot my partner, his partner was behind a little parapet dugout area, berm, Mike, no more than 7 yards ahead of me as we were pushing on an online formation, through the top of the grow. And these are 6-foot marijuana plants, manzanita everywhere. So, I mean, I was 3 yards from my nearest partner, left or right, and they would disappear entirely as we're pushing and sweeping and doing a scan with our weapons and going forward. And I didn't know that there was a sawed-off shotgun with buckshot in it aimed right at me until Snake from the sheriff's department saw him from the far outside of the flank of our online formation. And he and Apache engaged that guy and got him down probably seconds before I took a face full of buckshot.
Wow.
That was sobering,
yeah.
And I'm here to tell the story, luckily. And even more importantly than me and another game warden and other guys not getting hurt because they're quick action, my partner survived that. Mm-hmm. When he was shot by the other gunman, he survived that. And when I was engaging that other gunman and his bad guy was coming back around to finish the job or see what he had hit, that guy was out of the game. He dropped, hit, possibly injured, we don't know, but he was no longer a threat. But how we have tiny team, we got a game warden on his first marijuana operation on a cartel grow in the Silicon Valley, bleeding out of 4 holes through both legs from a 7.62 by 39, steel core round. Wow. Bad guy only got 1 round off, and we heard that round, and we knew it wasn't from an M4 and it wasn't from an M14. You and I know the difference. Yeah. How that AK sounds compared to a big, 7.62 NATO versus that 5.56 that my partner shot in the sheriff's department. When that all happened, I went, we don't have enough trauma dressings. We only have 6 guys. Now we have 5 guys. So we are going to hold a perimeter. We were all trained through tactical tracking operations classes to hunt armed men even after a gunfight and safely go get them. We had just come out of that school. We were confident. A lot of the guys on the team were a Marine Corps veteran, that had extensive combat history in Beirut. And the sheriff's deputies that we were on that mission with, all 3 of them were 3 out of the 5 best snipers for their SWAT team. We could have done this, but we didn't have enough guys. Yeah. So we had to just hold that perimeter until we had help. And without a contingency plan on an ops plan or our administration, as we're calling out, officer down, this is what we have, send some help. No one knew what air support could come in and pull my partner out of a hot zone until that whole mountain was secure. So we had choppers from Cal Fire and from other agencies just saying, we can't come in until it's clear. If it's hot, we can't come in. We had news choppers flying over that we thought were law enforcement choppers, and we're popping the, few smokes we have to show an LZ, and they're just getting a news bite. It's all over the country on, the morning news. This was a Friday, August 5th, 2005. I'll never forget. So there was all kinds of shit we had to change.
Yeah.
And my mind's reeling during this incident. First thing is my partner going to survive? He was starting to go into shock. He had lost a lot of blood, motivated guy, best game wardens ever that I've ever worked, one of the best. I come out of the academy, hit the ground running, great partner in the county. And we were going to do an illegal deer baiting case the following weekend on the deer opener. And that's all he was talking about. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get patched up. I want to be on that baiting case with you. And I'm looking at the wounds going, oh man,
you're probably not going to be doing that.
I don't think we're going to do that. And I hope you can just work again and you survive. And we were keeping as calm as we could, because other than the few, gauze and a couple of Israeli bandages we had from Apache, from his military experience in combat in the Marine Corps, we were ill-equipped on that too. This was before anticoagulants like Celox and Quick Clot. Mm-hmm. We weren't doing, the primary and dirty tourniquet double down. Trauma medicine was really rudimentary. You guys in the Global War on Terror were just starting to get some great stuff that we were just starting to get wind of right within the year after that shootout. And then we were equipping properly. But anyway, belaboring it, we got off that mountain, and when I got that question from my chief, I said, we need a specialized team. And she said, I agree, we do, but there is no way our political administration, from the director to the governor and within ranks, executive staffers all around her, would ever see this, because they just don't feel it's game warden work. And I went, well, she had a quote that I quote all the time, change is inevitable, but growth is optional. And we are creatures of habit, and we don't like to change, especially in traditional law enforcement agencies. But to say that game wardens don't belong in cartel, marijuana gardens, with all the environmental crime going on that these guys cause, and we haven't even talked about the banned poisons that they bring up from Mexico because they're so deadly. They're banned in this country by the EPA from even being possessed. They're felonies. I mean, we didn't even know that stuff was out there yet. But of all, at that time in my career, I'd done pretty much every patrol job or undercover job or Marine patrol, an FTO, a field training officer, firearms committee, weapons instructor. I'd done all the good stuff. And when I got to this job, of all the heinous poaching I'd seen my whole career, and all the dead wildlife killed illegally, and the black market sales, and the undercover buy busts I'd done, the stream alteration and poisoning of waterways and pollution, I had never seen a more pervasive environmental criminal than these cartel growers. When I saw that 04 grow, I went, one grow can do this much damage, and there's probably, conservative estimate, 3,000 to 4,000 or 5,000 of these grows in California a year, and I know we're missing some. That's conservative.
Yeah.
My mind just said, I need to focus on this, or some of us do. Not everybody. Not everyone wants to be a tactician or a special operations guy. Not everybody wants the challenges, the danger, the physical tasks, the preparation on and off duty, as you know, but some of us do. And I was very fortunate that there were a handful within agency, and it would take every bit of almost a decade later, till 2013, when I was blessed to build the pilot program and handpick the right guys and get the blessing to do it, which the new book's all about. It's really about what got us finally there, and now what are the challenges to build a team of this type in a moderately progressive agency at the time, and continue with that growth versus just the change that we're trying to fight.
8 years later, that's how long it took.
It
finally.
It did. So we had the shooting in 05, and then we had two more shootings, one in 07, one in 09, which we came out of well, and these were other shootings with the same sheriff's deputies in the Silicon Valley. But of course, now we had trained internally. So even though we didn't have a formalized team, the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Group and my little band of game wardens and guys I would borrow from other areas of the state, like Brian Boyd and his amazing canine Phoebe, a record breaker, but just an amazing dog, and bringing Marcos down from Orville, who was my partner in San Jose, in his early years and one of my closest friends on the team. The chiefs in those districts were very, very supportive of letting guys leave other parts of the state because they were so good at this job. And then Nate Arnold, the deputy chief, and now deputy chief captain at the time, that was my partner in building this team with the chief's blessing. He was doing this type of stuff over in the Central Valley, the Fresno area, below Kings Canyon, Yosemite, areas like that. And he started to pull us down and, let me build a team for a particular mission we were doing before anything was formalized. And when all that started to happen, I knew the wheels were turning. They just weren't turning fast enough.
Yeah.
I'm patient as a hunter and a sniper. And other than that, my character flaw is I don't have patience.
Mm-hmm.
If there's something that needs to get done.
Let's do it right now.
I know I'm speaking to the choir because I've seen how you roll,
Same
man.
way.
You roll hot. I'm like, I'm doing it yesterday until I'm exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And when I've checked this box, if it's done something good for the environment, for the friends, for the family, for training, then I'll breathe. And that's how all the guys on this team are wired. So we wanted to go, but we had to, again, and granted, it was a big task. I mean, for any law enforcement governing bureaucratic agency, especially a game warden agency, we did really well, and we were really blessed to get where we got, even though it took a while to make it even happen, because other states that are dealing with this, and I speak all over the country now to game warden agencies nationally, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. We have the same problem. How do we build a team? How can we build a team? I don't think we have enough guys to build a team. What growing pains did you go through? And I can speak to that because we had a lot of growing pains. We made a lot of mistakes, like we say, fail forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I want to save all these other groups, whether they're law enforcement, military, civilian, hiking groups going out in this potential danger area, save you from making the mistakes we made, learn from what we do, and cut your lag time and your learning curve down exponentially, But it was a long gap, yeah.
Why is, when I was in the military, even working with Northcom, even when I worked in Sitcom, we would get intel reports on cartel activity because it affected national security. I mean, there was always a consideration. And now training law enforcement all over the United States, I hear the same stories from them, where they get the intel reports of the constant influx of cartel and the effect on human trafficking, on drugs, on crime, and in this case in California, the illegal drug grows. But why is it so underreported in the media? It seems like if the media knew, it kind of would affect policy because it's now becoming a popular thing, but it's not really reported or talked about.
That's the biggest baffling reality of this whole issue. I mean, when we started to get into this, and it was never my objective to write a book at all before retirement, if even after retirement. And I was hit up by several people that knew about the shooting incident and the way it went down. And to give a little backstory on your point, I wrote a paper, basically a debrief paper for my agency. And Nancy, our chief at the time, she published it within agency, and it got handed out to everybody. And I spoke on it to the entire agency over 2 different years, what we call our advanced officer training, half the states all in one place, kind of a annual refresher. And that's what sparked the book of, we need to get this message out. And when we did the research through the publisher of, is anyone talking about these cartel grows being in America and what the effects are on the environment? There wasn't a book, a magazine article from anyone, not even DEA, drug enforcement agencies. And I'm writing the first book as a game warden. So I'm thinking there's something wrong with this picture, but there's a bigger depth to the issue because at least I'm bringing the environmental component in that nobody was addressing at the time. So the first book is published in 2010. Our agency was roped into working with production crews for the first Game Warden reality show called Wild Justice on National Geographic. It was the first of its type. There have been a lot of good ones since, and right, wrong, or indifferent about doing TV, and it is arduous, and you lose, you got to play the opposite game a little bit. But for game wardens that come from small agencies to get the message out, more of a benefit than a detriment.
Super important, right? Public education.
We needed it.
Yeah, public relations.
Yeah, an agency with less than 400 officers, and that don't have an outreach campaign or a whole budget and a whole division geared toward that. One thing that was cool about that show when the book came out is they were embedding with me and Santa Clara County sheriffs on some of these grow raids, from the helicopter in, from our assaults. We didn't have the dogs yet, but they saw some of this stuff and they were exposing this visually, and the public was blown up all over the world watching this show. Like, what the heck? Poison cannabis? Oh my God. I'm a black market cannabis user, and am I getting this poison stuff? Wow. Hopefully not, because now we have a legitimate cannabis industry doing it by the numbers that support our cause, and we're supporting what they're doing as long as they do it legally to make sure this stuff doesn't seep back into the market. But that was 10 years before Hidden War was published after I retired. We've done, my buddy Rick Stewart with American Zealot Productions for NRA TV and History Channel, 2 documentaries on this topic, one from the first book era and one where he embedded with our team and got the team training and got the dog work and got some, actual raids. And when I'm, at the NRA annual in Indianapolis with Colonel Oliver Norris blessing because he endorsed the book, read it, was outraged by it, not only on the drug front and the cartel front, but the poisoning of the environment because he's a hunter too. He said, well, this book better be, we better launch it at NRA at our annual convention. We had to have it there. And that was the first, literally days before the first hard, wet copies arrived.
Yeah.
And my point, though, is I'm, doing book signings and people all over the country going, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Lieutenant, I had no idea this was in America. I've never even seen this on the news. To your point, that was a decade later, and we've been on worldwide television doing it. So it gets a little bit of attention when an incident goes down. It backs off. Something more heated comes up, and I don't know if it's because it's a domestic issue, if there's not enough attention toward. And you said it best just a minute ago when you said, well, you get the intel reports on human trafficking, gun running, methamphetamine, all these different things the cartels are doing embedded within America. What we need to remember is the same groups out of central Mexico are running operations in the whole country, not just California. And the same groups doing all those things that we just mentioned are the ones doing the tainted cannabis production. It's just a different activity within the organization. So even though my team focuses on that, they're responsible in the winter when they're not growing cannabis and it's wet and the hills are, flooded. They're cooking 22-pound methamphetamine cooks and sending that all over the country. They're into the synthetic fentanyl now that's killing thousands.
Yeah.
They're running, human trafficking is going on in every state of the union, and we've picked up some intel without going into too much detail because ongoing stuff of some major gun running and ammunition running to fuel the cartel wars down south of the border, which fortunately they're not that violent amongst each other within border because it's bad for business and the attention. But that's where all that's going. So it's a big enterprise, and it's all very, very fluid on a business model and effective, and not done so ad hoc as people might think.
What is the, if we're looking at what a concerted effort, it's 10,000, are we looking U.S. wide, around 10,000 illegal grows? What do you think the estimate is?
I'd say bulk of them on the West Coast, bulk of them in California, but conservative estimate, 6 to 10. Yeah. Probably, and one thing I noticed, we do an annual convention called the NOEA. It's a Game Wardens convention for all over the country annually. And I present this stuff, and I'm going to speak again at the one this year, and start showing the matrix and the numbers in the West Coast. And then for the book, we got some maps, and in the appendices, the science part, in the afterword, past the afterword, you start to see in Hidden War the trends and where it is in other states, on a map. And little states like Tennessee or like, Indiana, Iowa, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Michigan.
Pick any place rural.
Any place rural that has like a refuge, and has open space. And the guys finding these grows now are game wardens primarily, or hunters and fishermen, like the stuff you and I like to do off grid with our families. They're on a pristine trout creek that no one's really getting to. They're going off trail a little bit to get to that one waterway, and all of a sudden it's got a diversion in it for a weed farm that's cartel run. And they're running into it too. So fortunately in the other states, they don't have the Mediterranean climate we have in California, so it's far less in severity, but it's just adding to the overall numbers.
What's the incentive there for somebody from the cartel? I get the supply chain incentive, which is, why ship it, why push it when we could have it embedded into the system. But why would they do that? Why would they risk that? And is it worth the risk for them?
It is. It's cost benefit analysis. Under a business model, it's like, okay, I'm a grow boss, right? And a grow boss might be responsible for, let's say, 5 to 10 grows. Then you have what's called a plaza boss. That's a working term. A plaza boss might run a whole sector of a state, maybe even a whole state. He might run 50 to hundreds of grows, depending on how big his area of operation is, how diverse he is, how many people he has under him. And when you look at that structure, and something I go into in the new book that I was able to talk to generically but still get the message out, I set in on an upper level plaza boss debrief with Santa Clara County, the Silicon Valley guys and DEA, and a guy that was basically responsible for about 50 grow sites in Northern California, and also doing methamphetamine stuff, and was popped on other things, and was very candid, and very honest in our interview of the magnitude of some of this stuff and how far it goes and how easy it is to embed, and how lack of any border real stoppage or hindrance there is to get his operatives across the border. And when he kind of articulated to me that, we know how overworked you guys are, we know how undermanned you are, and we know if I put out 10 grows in one particular county, you're probably going to find 3 to 5 of them. You're going to rate them. I'm going to lose that product, but I'm going to get 5 or 6 out. And those are 5,000 or 10,000 or 15,000 plants on the high end. And you got to look at every plant putting out at least a pound or 2 of bud, a couple thousand a plant at least in profit. You add up all the zeros and you're talking, low $2-3 million profit, as high as 10, 20, $30 million.
Oh, wow.
I mean, big money. So they don't mind losing some grow sites, so it's very much worth it for them. And they're still doing production down in central Mexico, Michoacan, other parts of the highlands, defeating the federales from getting detected because they're good growers. Those same guys get vetted down there before they come up here. Those guys, the cartels got to pay $4,000 to $7,000 max to get their best guys here. And if they do get busted and deported, they can be back in 24 hours, on the close end.
Yeah.
But 3-4 days, hey man, I need you back in Northern California. I'm going to pay the guy. We're going to get you through a tunnel. However, we're going to get you back.
Yeah.
We've seen guys that have been deported, no exaggeration, 15, 20 times. Different canines have bit the same bad guy that's got murder raps. He's got assault. He's got narcotic trafficking raps. I mean, a real bad dude.
And he's just getting deported. He's
just getting deported, and he's coming back, because he's a deportable felon, so we're not going to run him through our court system. He gets back. And then in certain states with sanctuary state doctrine, like California, my old state, now you can't even talk to ICE through official channels, or it's going to be a big problem for you on the state front. And those.
Well, how does that work? So let's say you roll up a guy, and you just can't, because I have a hard time understanding sanctuary, the negative in sanctuary when it comes to this problem, which is, you identify somebody is a felon or they've committed a crime,
right?
But you as a local peace officer in a state that you are working for can't communicate to figure out if the guy has any federal issues via ICE, right?
Right.
Is that how it works?
That's exactly how it works. And that's the big controversy.
Well, they tell you as an officer that?
Yeah, basically we're told, and we were told, I go into this in the book, not slanderous, but just honestly, especially in...
Well, this is super important because I think this is like one of the big issues, right?
This
is some
gets
of the roots.
To the core. And what gets confusing is when you look at the mission we're doing and you get people that, different listeners will take this, well, wait a minute, this could become a racist issue, this could be a border issue, this could be an anti-immigration issue. And it's absolutely none of the above. We're not talking about immigrants from Mexico trying to chase the America dream, and everybody should, right? I mean, come on, look at what the blessings we have in this country.
Yeah.
Through legal channels. These are deportable felons that have criminal histories in Mexico. They're a small percentage, but a very violent group that Mexican citizens don't want anything to do with. They don't want them anywhere. They don't want to be under that fear of the danger these guys pose and the power they bring and the violent nature of that violent culture of chaos that the cartels propagate. So when we can't communicate with ICE and we got to run them through state channels, and we're not going to have courts necessarily wanting to prosecute somebody that's not here legally, doesn't have any assets, it's a marijuana case in a state that's regulated now, unless there's environmental crime associated with it, who's really going to do a lot with that case? Is a jury going to convict somebody on that? I mean, unless there was a gun pulled and it got violent and it was a canine deployment and various things like that, that's where the debate lies. And we were under orders, and still are in California, not to talk to ICE agents, even though, and here's the controversy, and here's really the conflict, and really the contradiction. We're federally mandated as federal officers, to work federal cases and under policy to communicate with our federal brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
We are. But we're being told not to. But By
the California Department of Justice?
Or
somewhere in there.
It's governor down.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying my bosses at the administrative executive staff level aren't looking to do this. They don't want to give those orders necessarily. But as people will read in Chapter 9, our last gunfight before I retired, and it was the same property just on the Santa Cruz County side, the same property. We're 99% sure the same organization that shot my partner in 05. Because the way this group was set up, the way they were bunkered into place, the way they had high ground, chopped AK-47s, sawed-off shotguns, a bunch of different assault weapons, steel core ammunition. It was literally a flashback to 05 when we didn't have the team, when we were doing that assault. Well, that day we had our new team, and talk about bringing a lot of boys to the party. We had 3 canines that day. We had our 2 best canines, and then we had a great canine from Santa Clara, because nobody else would help us on that mission. So it was a couple of sheriff's deputies, God bless them, their great canine, 2 of our dogs, and 1 out of 3 bad guys had 2 guns coming down on us on a trail as me and our canine Brian, Champ, our new canine, and that point team, and I was running the point team, and our QRF wasn't far behind us, and he had weapons out. He got engaged by a handgun, non-fatally, but fortunately none of us took fire. Dogs did a great job, and we contained that problem. 11,000 plant grow, and the irony, Mike, of that particular grow site, a third of that grow site was on the property of a place called Camp Loma, a children's summer science education camp.
Oh my gosh.
And this was in the middle of summer. And how those guys didn't interact with these kids is anybody's guess. And we got one of the world's most pristine, best mountain biking parks, demonstration forest right below the canyon, Soquel Creek running through the bottom of the canyon at all their waterways that were poisoned leach into, another steelhead trout fishery, one of the few on the Santa Cruz coastline. That was one of my last missions before
So they're
retirement.
hidden in plain sight. They're hidden
in plain sight, just staying low lit. But we were told when we were doing that operation, halfway through, after we had the gunfight, now we were on admin leave, we were taking a break, we finished the mission, and I'm in Montana decompressing way up on the Canadian border, and I get the call from my captain. She's like, I can't believe I got to tell you this, but we cannot talk to ICE about this case. I go, we have him injured from a gunfight, and ICE wants to talk to him because he's a deportable felon. She goes, can't come from us. And those were the orders. And she said, I can't believe I got to tell you this. And you can imagine how that went over with the guys.
So I don't really understand this. I can kind of understand the whole, you stop a dude in a traffic violation,
right,
and you don't want to go down the rabbit hole, and you don't want to cross-pollinate information. But this seems so different because it's so overtly aggressive and dangerous.
Right.
And the fact that there's a system that's designed to almost facilitate the deportation of felons and potential murderers,
right?
That to me just makes no sense.
Well, and it doesn't make any sense, and not everyone agrees with it, and we can debate. I mean, you could debate politics and where California and other states that are doing some of the sanctuary state stuff are going, but you hit it on the head when you said this is a very small percentage of confirmed felons with heavy criminal history that they're going to do damage in Mexico. They're going to do damage here. They're going to do damage in another country if they're from another country.
Yeah.
This is a threat. This is a threat to everybody, not just illegally here in America, even in the homeland, So we need to differentiate that. And I'd like to think that the orchestrators, the architects of the sanctuary state doctrine, have that contingency and plan that we don't want to insulate and protect these guys. One, keep them in place to do more harm to our public, first and foremost.
Yeah.
And secondly, that we're passionate about our wildlife, waterways, and wild lands.
Yeah.
And it's all roped into one thing, not to draw attention to the other. And it's just, it's convoluted for sure. So when we built the Met, work within policy, do the best we can, and try to just stop the tide and hold back the tide a little bit, knowing we're not going to stop it. Because these guys, whether they're deported or not, they're getting across the border very easily for a very small amount of money. And we talk about debriefing those cartel guys, and the $4,000 to $7,000 figure we confirmed to get their operatives, even if they are deported, in any part of the state that didn't keep them from the deportable felon status, they're still, paying the money because these guys are not desperate workers seeking a job. These are vetted growers that know their stuff, and you got to respect the work they put in. They're a very formidable adversary. Like I'm sure you saw throughout your military career in certain countries you went to.
Yeah.
It's crazy, man. They work hard, they camouflage well, they FieldCraft well, they divert water wonderfully, they process marijuana great. They make a high dollar product. They do it relatively, basically under the radar. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the large percentage, we're catching more of them. We have gotten better at it, but we're not catching all of them. And, they get a few grows out of the many they put out there, even if many do get caught and eradicated and some of their guys do get taken into custody. They're still making hundreds of millions of dollars in one particular part of just the marijuana side.
So they're fitting into the loophole, and there's really no consequence at the end of the day. I mean, just you get caught, catch and release, and they're back at it again. Yeah. Let's talk about the environmental stuff, because
absolutely,
when I look at this from, it's bipartisan for sure, because it affects. There's effects on both sides, and one of the most substantial arguments for why we would pay attention to this and put money towards an operational unit and just aggressively go after it is the fact that it ruins the environment,
big time,
which is huge and detrimental, especially given the task that you guys are supposed to do in the first place. What are some of the things that you had mentioned about causing the 2.5 mile, killing everything 2.5 miles in the stream? Talk to us about the chemical, and then what other damages it's doing.
Yeah, the biggest problem is, Mike, they bring chemicals that were banned by the EPA about 20 years ago from being used for legitimate agriculture. Chemicals that are produced in America with trade names like carbofuran, furadan, Q-furan, metaphos. They're all anticoagulants. They're all nerve agents or any combination thereof. One small container that's maybe the size of this this beverage container, and it's all crystalline powder in it. When it's in its original form, is made to be mixed in with 4,000 to 5,000 gallons of water before it's distributed on edible agricultural plants and crops.
This is to kill the bugs or keep
bugs, rodents, anything that could come in. It could be, strawberries, it could be corn, it could be, whatever. And we used that in America for many years. And even though it was so diluted, EPA, as their testing got more solid, realized, hey man, this stuff is still highly toxic, even at a vastly diluted, distilled, mixed dosage. So we're going to ban it. We don't use it on anything in America. Third world countries can get it. It's kind of a golden item for the cartels. The trade name the growers call it is El Diablo, the devil.
Wow.
Yeah, we call it pink death. You hear all different trade names. This stuff's just nasty. Even the growers know how nasty it is, but they use it because it's so effective. It's part of the program and protocol, SOPs, if you will, of the organization.
And you can't get it in the U.S. They have to smuggle it in.
They have to smuggle it in, and they smuggle it out of shops in Tijuana and other places within Mexico. And literally, they're tier 1 growers. Their guns, their camping equipment, all their nomadic living supplies, their water pipe, the cannabis seeds, everything's already here for them with the infrastructure that's already embedded in America.
They just fall into it.
They just fall into it, and they go to work in an area, divert their water once their suppliers and embedded, national operatives work to get them on board. But they can't get the poison, so they smuggle the poisons in with them, camouflaged, wrapped, hidden, various different things. So what we see is a new container of this stuff in almost every cartel grow site, trespass grow site. And if it is diluted, it's in a 5 to 3 gallon backpack sprayer, sometimes a whole container. That's not diluted. I mean,
wow.
I've got pictures and PowerPoints that I show when I educate every level, left, right, cannabis user, non-cannabis user, whatever. Every faction of a grower in 3-color Army, woodland camo that we both wore for many years, early days, with a backpack sprayer on, with a whole bottle of this stuff poured in, and he's got no face protection, no nitrile gloves, and he's just spraying it on 11-foot plants behind Mount Hamilton in the Silicon Valley. And in the next picture, I get off his cell phone, because I foot tackled this guy with Sergeant Spagnola on a raid we did before Met started around 2011. And we got his cell phone, and we missed the grow the year before, but the pictures we got off his cell phone were crazy. And these are 2 of them. And now in the next picture, he's holding up a golden eagle that came in and died instantly ingesting some of this stuff. And a golden eagle's pretty rare.
Yeah.
You never shoot golden eagles. They're not a huntable species, protected raptor,
beautiful.
right?
Yeah.
And he's posing with it like, I got him. He didn't get my plants. That outrages anybody that loves wildlife.
Wow.
You know, and when I show animal rights groups this, I show cannabis groups this, I show conservative groups this, military, law enforcement, fly fishermen, you know, conservation groups, you name it, everyone's like, what is this stuff? And for them to come in and they're using it like that, and they're posing with the wildlife they're killing like a trophy, because it just stopped that animal from, you know, taking $3,000 to $5,000 out of their pocket by, you know, affecting that one plant. That's a horrible reality, you know. Horrible reality to see animals die this way. I mean, you know, a tablespoon of this stuff, a 400-pound black bear will come in and ingest this, and they'll put out, like, they'll take a tuna can, the growers, not with no tuna in it, but just some oil, and they'll have empty cans out like little perimeter poison baits before you even get to the grow, not to impact it. And a black bear, a mule deer, any animal will come in and lick up a little bit of the oil. Yep. Because they're scavengers, you know. Dead. And they're within 5 minutes, they're frothing at the mouth, and their central nervous system shuts down, and they die a violent death, a very painful death. And these are big animals. We see the rabbits, we see the raptors, we see the small stuff. And I've got pictures of the baby cub, you know, like a 50-pound cub that watches mom die, you know, the big sow, doesn't know why mom dies, climbs up a tree, kind of scared, and has ingested the poison too, just doesn't know it, and then dies as well. And you have the baby cub up in the V of the tree, mom's 10 feet below. Wow. And here's, you know, 2 bears. Yeah. What picture does that paint? You know, whether you're a preservationist and you don't like hunting, animal rights oriented, or you're a conservationist and like ethical, legal hunting to keep all the animals out there, provided they're harvested humanely and ethically. Mm-hmm. We all agree on one thing, why it's such a unifying issue nationally that you hit perfectly, is we can take those differences and set aside. No one wants to see an animal perish that way. Yeah. And for hunters that would give anything to harvest a black bear at the prime of their life when there aren't any young around, harvest the meat, eat the meat, appreciate, respect the animal, honor the animal, and now that meat is so tainted. I mean, this stuff is like nuclear toxic, deadly, right? You're not going to ever eat that animal. That is just a waste of an animal with an environmental poisoning product that's so deadly. The byproduct throughout the streams and everything is just horrendous. We see this stuff in creeks where, remember that first story where me and GI went up and saw that Bisqueen Line Dam? Yeah. We didn't know it at the time, but it wasn't just because there was no water downstream that everything was dead. It's because they put some of the pink death right in the water diversion, and they just pipe some of the poison water directly to the base of the plant. So it's in the soil, it's in the water. That creek's done. Wow. That creek's done. I mean, we're talking fish dead for 2, 3, 4, 5 miles, depending on the amount of poisons put in it. And that's what our scientists have actually, determined scientifically. And it baffles me to even talk about it still.
What does the cleanup look like for something like that? Because you mentioned early days, like 2004, when you come across this grow, and then it's time to clean, and there's a term you use for it. It starts with the R's. Reclamation. Yep. So you're trying to reclaim. I'm assuming reclaim. It comes from reclaiming, or
it's a term it kind of insinuates we're reclaiming our land from a destroying invader, whoever that is. Yep. And restoring it. I like reclamation, but I also like restoration. Yeah. Environmental restoration, because it's not only reclaiming it to pristine conditions because we now have ownership of it again. Yeah. Reclamation has a term that it's been taken by someone that shouldn't have it, and that's accurate. Yeah. So that's kind of why reclamation has kind of been, and no one's ever asked me actually the reclamation term before, and I'm glad you did.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's
more to it than cleanup, right?
Yeah, there's definitely more, definitely more to clean up, and then you have to take it back, and then the old protocol was you took the plants because the plants were tied into budgets. Is that correct?
Yeah, what it was is budgets from the DEA to each state, to each county, to each agency was based on the amount of plants each group eradicated throughout the year.
In pounds? Or
just in numbers.
In numbers.
Yeah, so like, for instance, in Santa Clara County, the back in Silicon Valley when I was starting in this early with the sheriffs, and we weren't formalized, from about 2004 to say 2011, 2012, average we'd eradicate anywhere between, 75 and on a big year, maybe 140, 150,000 plants. So our DSEP money, which is the acronym for the fund that goes to our agency to fight it next year, is directly related to plant count. So the more plants we eradicate, the more money we're going to have, which pays for overtime, operational time, prep time, mission planning, means we can do more ops.
Yeah.
Including the reclamation side. We started to really, as Fish and Game was involved, and Nancy was the chief that was really responsible for this push, was, hey, if we're involved, we want to get the reclamation component involved. And we want to be rewarded for reclamation, because leaving a Superfund site out there for the environmental damage just to continue is quite frankly bullshit.
Yeah.
We need to do something different. And actually the drug czars listened to us, and they started to see what our agency was doing as exemplary, because environmental protection it's the hot buzz on every circle, right? Environmentalists, conservationists, patriots. I mean, it's one thing we unify on. And like we talked about,
it's like the only thing.
It's there you go. It's the only thing. And when nothing's unifying, and we talked about this, before and during the broadcast, and the left and right are just bashing, and we're not even really doing things our country needs on issues. We're unified on this.
Yeah.
I can go into any group and see outrage on almost any person's face, and they can be completely the polar opposite of me, raised completely different, be completely hard left, whatever. And that's what it's going to take. But fortunately, our administrators at the presidential level have started to reward financially for reclamation numbers. Ooh. And something that was cool when we formed the tactical unit and we got MET formed, we started to use a form that my partner Nate Arnold had designed not too long before we formed the MET team formally, what we call an ENF 65 form. It's like a matrix check sheet. Every operation you do, you record how many plants were eradicated, how many poisons you found, how many miles of water line you pulled, how many diversions to dams you restored, how many tons of trash were removed, how many weapons were seized, canine engagement, officer hours, overtime hours, miles driven, blade time, bring a helicopter in. Those helicopters are, we're talking a couple $1,000s an hour at least to run a bird. And, we have our own birds and we have contracts, and it eats up money just in seconds. And really we use helicopters that eat up more blade time on the reclamation component 9 times, 10 times more than the operational side. Usually we don't even touch a bird until we're short hauling out, because we don't like to fly in and announce our presence. Some agencies do that. That's fine. They just want to scatter growers, not have any conflict. Obviously if I'm the first guy as a team leader with one of my partners and we're the first to drop into a grow from a short haul line, I feel like the piñata about to get batted out of the air. Yeah. And we do the aerial gunning from the line and everything, but I sure like being able to move and scoot on the ground. So we go in, we do our thing early in the morning, middle of the night, whatever we need to do, NVGs if necessary, and we fly out. But we're not eating up blade time. Very little blade time is actually eaten up during the tactical op until we get to reclamation. Then it's load after load after load. And we've burned up, 2 days of a blade just doing, 20, 30 loads of trash on a massive grow site. Wow. So,
and you guys are doing it independently, or do you bring it in bio guys?
Well, we have help from other agencies, other people that are trained to go in there. Sometimes Forest Service will contract with hazmat cleanup crews, but that is still evolving. Quite honestly, the money involved to bring in a hazmat team to get them in there safely, just the logistics of getting them in there, because some of this stuff's so remote, is pretty tough. It normally falls on us. And it falls on people.
I was just thinking that's another thing you just added in the evolution of it.
It is, and it's growing. There's a group that I've been roped into being an advisory board member, a really good group called Cannabis Removal on Public Lands. CROP is the acronym, and they're basically all about national grows, not just in California, but a national front of bringing in funding from everywhere. Conservation organizations, preservation organizations, the cannabis industry, the legislature, collecting money as an NGO, and then putting that towards groups and training staff and bringing staff in that can go anywhere in the country and be basically a reclamation trained.
Ooh, that's so cool.
Savvy crew. We need a lot of that.
I love that. I'm starting like a CBD business on the side, just being smart with money, and I'm passionate about CBD and its benefits. Which is hemp derived. This is no THC in it. But we have a model of the business is taking, we say something like, we're taking profits from the land and returning it back into the land, because we want to take, we want to make the money, but then we want to take proceeds from profits and put it back into it. But reclamation seems something very interesting to do, because when you look at the things that you can do, maybe you shouldn't just go out and, you can go out and pick up trash and do whatever it is on the trails.
Right. Yeah.
But reclamation seems so much more comprehensive when you're looking at cleaning what's broke or fixing what's broke for long-term survival.
And truly being impactful
Yeah.
environmentally than just, like you said, picking up trash on a trail. And to the CBD side and the cannabis industry, some of our best allies are the legitimate cannabis farmers that are as organically and conservation, preservation, and lovers of wildlife and waterways as we are.
Really?
Yeah, and this is the irony. Everybody comes in to think like, well, you just formed a spec ops unit to fight the cartels, growing marijuana. You got to be anti-cannabis, and that's furthest from the truth.
Yeah.
I'm completely neutral. CBD, the recovery elements, the healing elements, THC, the regulation, right, wrong. I don't have a stance on it, negative or positive. All I ask is if we're gonna regulate, let's just regulate smart.
Yeah.
Let's go after the people that are really doing the damage, which we know what the cartels are doing. We know that the legitimate cannabis industry, if they're doing the environmental, protocol, they're educating, they're making sure they're not, complicit or generating a product that has any type of inorganics or pesticides that could be getting into our black market of children, kids, medical patients, veterans, whoever.
Yeah.
Which all this stuff is. This stuff is going all over the country and supplying, 70 to 80+% of the black market that our cannabis consumers are ingesting.
And they don't want the black market. I would think, good, responsible farmers and of hemp period, or of cannabis period, would not want to compete with these guys and want to support the black, going against the black market anyway.
Yeah. And one of the coolest things that I've mentioned a few times before is I was one of the, if not I think I was the first LE guy to go to a cannabis growers forum through the California Growers Association.
Crap. They're like NARC.
Like a NARC, speak on a panel.
Wow.
And I'm in BDUs, and I'm in my med uniform, and I'm going to do a PowerPoint. I'm on a panel with cannabis organizations that are, getting into the business, and legislatures that pass the medical laws and are pushing Prop 64. And the president, if you will, Hezekiah Allen, is like the proctor. He's the moderator from California Growers Association on the panel. And there's 500 growers, in a veterans hall, in Mendocino County or Santa Cruz. And I walk in and you just see their eyes go, who's that dude?
Oh, man.
And I had one gal actually look at me and go, you can't be here. This is a conflict of interest. You have no business being here. And I just went, give me a minute. I'm not here to work anybody. I run a team. Outreach and education is part of it. I'm going to show about a 20-minute PowerPoint.
Yeah.
That's my role. And I'm going to take questions of this panel of cannabis people from all sides of the fence. And as I'm putting up the pictures of the story we're telling. You got to
be blowing their mind.
And I'm watching some of the guys and gals just mouths on the ground.
Wow.
Some are crying.
Yeah.
And they're just like the dead, black bear and her sow, a dead mountain lion, punji pits, our dogs coming out of surgery that have been stabbed. I mean, all of this stuff, our canines. And they're like, that's not us.
Yeah.
We don't sanction that. We love our wildlife. And in all fairness, there's still a lot of black market and criminality going on, even in the non-cartel side, because people still aren't doing it right. But there's regulation groups.
Yeah.
Our other cannabis groups in our agency, like the watershed enforcement teams, the marijuana permitting teams, they deal with that. But there is a percentage of cannabis farmers that have become allies, and they say what they mean what they say, and they're putting up their time and their money to want to fight that fight and not only legitimize their clean side of the business, but actually, educate against this trespass cartel thing that nobody's ever going to be for. I mean, after both those meetings, I went back to my truck. I got my companion canine Apollo walking along, loading her in the truck, putting all my tech gear away. And I have 30 growers swarming the truck. I'm like, oh, this is getting Western. What do they want? And here's business cards. And they're like, hey, Lieutenant, if you need bodies to reclaim, to clean up, we have assets, we have trucks, we'll drive anywhere. I'm like, okay, I haven't had that offer. Now, can I take you into a poison grow site? Not without training. But the fact that you're really putting up people, you're making that offer, that's great. And when I get conservation groups, scout groups, everybody wants to be involved. And what it's really is, it's a patriotic purification of our nation coming from both sides, and different sides that don't see eye to eye, that do not necessarily accept one another. And I've just, we've been really lucky as the Met team to kind of be on that fine tightrope and try to stay out of the politics and just take cannabis out of it.
Yeah.
It's an environmental crime. public safety, national security, domestic ecoterrorism issue. It really is.
Yeah.
And it's no exaggeration. And the Associated Press quoted me, Mike, like 4 or 5 years ago, of saying, if cherry tomatoes were on the black market and worth $4,000 a pound, and they had to only be grown illegally on, the mountains above Silicon Valley or here in the Arizona forests, we'd probably be having gunfights over tomatoes.
Oh yeah.
So
red gold
instead of the green rush, right? So, I don't even like to really make it about cannabis. That is a catalyst because that's another black market item. It could be anything else. But the bottom line is we got an environmental message. We got a public safety message that we can unify on. And that does feel good.
Yeah.
That feels really good, and we're not going to be in the same group, and that's fine.
It's just so funny because I'm like looking at this from, security minded with my degree in crisis management. I'm like, well, you have the cartel there.
Right.
They're armed.
That factor.
The public safety issue just alone of these, being in close proximity to children, to people who are hiking or hunting.
Right.
And it's like, man, these are armed thugs that are just in the middle of oh man. But you're right. The environmental factor and how it's destroying. Let's stand together on that at least. Yeah. Let's figure that out. Now you evolve and we get into the time period of 2013 where finally, in quotations, that it's like they're like, okay, let's do this.
Here we go.
What is the deciding factor for that? What is the catalyst that allowed that to be done based off of you constantly, I'm assuming at this point, beating it home?
Oh man, there's a little pride in this story, and there's a little chronology of like, those historical moments in your career where you knew something had to change when you built your specialized team, or something that wasn't working in SF or politics or whatever. It's the third chapter in Hidden War that goes. It was a 2012 mission. It was right above the foothills of Morgan Hill, where I'm born and raised, and it was on Croy Road, and it was a 7,000 plant grow. It fed Uvis Creek, which went into a reservoir where I checked fishermen forever. I grew up, caught my first bluegill there.
Oh, that's so awesome!
Little pristine area, southwestern Silicon Valley, mostly horses and equestrian and wooded parks and stuff. And we're working with the sheriffs. We don't have met yet. Nancy's our chief. She's on board. Mike is a deputy chief, the chief that would later become badge number 1 and bless this team. Mike was the chief for the Northern Enforcement District, where Brian Boyd, K9 Phoebe, Marcos, they were all part of that district. And because Mike was very supportive of what we were doing, and we didn't have a formalized team, and Nancy was supportive as our badge number 1 in charge, I had borrowed Brian and Phoebe to work with him and his K9. Mark had come down, and we had a big complement of sheriff's deputies and a couple other patrol wardens that worked for me in patrol. I was a lieutenant at the time of patrol. Yeah. Just on the fringes, specializing in this in the summer, though, almost 24/7. We go and do this mission. We get up into position. Brian had me not only leading my part of the team, the Game Warden complement, but Brian had me being his canine cover. That if anything happens to him, I deal with the dog. I deal with the suspect that the dog's, got under bite duress. If it comes to that, I'm handgun armed. I'm not pushing a carbine because I got to be light. I got to be able to move, get to the taser, get to the cuffs, go hands on, whatever. And we all train on doing that. So it's like, great, I'm going to work with Brian. And we had done many missions together with the dog. Some for Wild Justice we filmed to kind of show the nature of what we needed to address with the cartel cannabis problem. But we never had a bite. We never had an apprehension. And now we got the 2 growers, and they're in the BDUs, and they're working, and we're at the top of the grow site. We got an overwatch. The dog's out on point to smell. We got riflemen laid out in a good formation. Textbook. It was working like a charm. I'm like, oh man, it couldn't have gone any better. They're going to walk right into us. We're going to do an announcement. It's going to be 18, 20 yards max. If we need to deploy the dog, if they pull a weapon, it'll be light speed. And as we're coming in, bad guys coming in, the guy on the left has a big Taurus Judge pistol, revolver, big shiny chrome thing. You can see it. And he's walking toward us, and Brian sees him, and then we see guy number 2 and don't see a gun on him yet, but he's reaching for something. And right away, we deploy the dog because they're already, almost in eyesight of us. They're about to make eye contact, rules of engagement. Gun starts, the guy that had the Judge is starting to grab for his gun. Brian's sprinting. I'm sprinting right behind him. The fur missile, Phoebe, has already taken off. And Brian goes, John, take my dog. Because we were watching Phoebe veer to the right to take guy number 2. And the most immediate threat that we could actually see a gun on, my guy's pulling, but his guy actually is facing and coming out of a holster. So Brian goes hands on hand on hand with him. This guy's about to pull. Phoebe gets a bite, puts him down, biting his right calf. He's struggling, but taking the bite pretty hard, and Phoebe's in deep.
Yeah.
And unbeknownst to me, I didn't know what weapon he was pulling, but it was a Russian Torkurov, little 7.65 think caliber.
Yeah.
And he's pulling that thing, but Phoebe had enough bite duress on him that he couldn't just whip it out and engage me from me to you as I'm coming down on his back to tackle him. And I got 2 carbine riflemen coming right behind me. So this guy was this close to laying waste to me and my partners, or even hitting Brian, who's now run past him, because in a fill and flow, you know, it just went to, it went to typical Western. We're going to adjust. Allow me to, get him under control, get the gun out of his hand. He didn't get shot. He got bit pretty good, but he survived. I didn't get shot. My partners didn't get shot. We caught the 2. We got everything contained. We got him in custody. We bandaged up the dog bit suspect. We start the process of the scene. We're starting to eradicate, and right away, the light bulb went off. I said that was one of about 20 gunfights we narrowly avoided this year. Wow. And we've already had up to this point 4 or 5 gunfights.
Yeah.
And I just went right up the hill where I had cell coverage, and I called my chief. I called Nancy, told her how it went. I said, Phoebe was a godsend. I need her on every mission. I called Mike, running Northern District. I said, thanks for lending these guys out. This was amazing.
If you didn't have that, what would that? It would have been a gunfight for sure, and it would have been a gunfight at contact distance.
Yeah, I'd like to think skill sets and shooting all the time, I would have got the jump on him. But I mean, come on, he could get lucky at this side, pivot. I'm not seeing the gun. Our rules of engagement, it's not weapons free. They got to have a gun on us, deadly force threat on me or a partner before I can engage. So dealing with all of that, there was a light bulb moment, and after I made those notifications from my 2 chiefs. I spent about 72 hours not sleeping much of what had to happen next.
Wow. That direct and that aggressive. So the frequency of this, I'm assuming at this point, is just becoming it's hitting a pinnacle moment. Like you're like you can't, you've seen all the patterns and everything, and it's happening. You walk up to the top of the hill and you're like, hey man, both chiefs, this is what's going down. This has to be changed.
It was. That's exactly it, Mike. We were at the point where every mission, it was a potential gunfight. Mm-hmm. And now I've seen Phoebe, in action, actually not just training, because we trained around her a lot on bites, how to handle the dog, how to, handle her if Brian's not, if he's, heaven forbid, incapacitated or dealing with something different. But that day when it was so personal, and after all the stories I had heard he had encountered up in Shasta County in the northern where he was originally from, I just knew something had to change. And we had, there was a transition. Nancy was retiring within months from a great career. I mean, she was the driving force of progression on so many programs in our agency. And Mike was the next chief who actually stayed on. Oh. He was set to retire. Wow. But he was such a good candidate to be chief with 35 years of experience and highly respected. And, he had a career similar to Nance. He had done everything, ran our academy, developed our academy, co-developed our academy. And when he came on board, I thought this is the time to breach it. We can at least try. Yeah. If he'll take a meeting with me and with Nate Arnold, my fellow captain over the Central Enforcement District, and let us propose something. Yeah. And I wasn't going to overwhelm him when he's just getting his feet wet of running the agency out of the headquarters in Sacramento. That's a big task. But we had a meeting in the fall after grow season 2012, and that mission only happened a couple months beforehand. And he agreed,
it's fresh on his mind.
Oh, it's fresh on his mind. Mm-hmm. He's getting all the updates. Nancy's getting all the updates. And it was one of those things where he said, what do you guys propose? And we had those ENF 65 forms that Nate put up that showed the documentation we had put up. And the numbers were just outrage. I mean, just insightful. I mean, just crazy what the numbers were telling us. They just, they painted a very, very dark picture, and we knew we were only documenting maybe a quarter, if lucky.
This is what you're just coming across.
This is what we're just coming across.
Because stuff you're not.
And not everybody's doing the protocol, right?
Yeah.
One district is doing it. Other people don't even have the form. We're 7 different districts in the state, and everyone's got their own little fiefdom of chiefs. We don't have SOPs that are universal, especially in cannabis. It's a new field. And so Nate's got the data, and we know we're underrepresented by at least 75%. I've got all the kind of the tactical stuff worked out of what we've learned building light running teams and QRF systems and apprehension point units and stuff with canines. And he just said, so you want a strike team dedicated? And I said, yes, sir. We'd like to try it. He said, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do this next summer. Grow season's over now, which would have been 2013. We're going to do it for 3 months. We're going to test it. You guys will document it. You'll get the people you want. You'll get the canines. You'll go anywhere in the state you need to. There's going to be some patrol administrators, middle management, very, very upset that their best game wardens are leaving patrol to basically be on this, tactical unit. But I'll handle that. You guys just get the groundwork done. And I left absolutely just surreal, buzzing, in shock. Like, now I got to catch up. I'm used to thinking 5 steps ahead. Now I'm like, oh man, but this is going to happen. This is really going to freaking happen. This had been 15 years in the making. This had been the first grows, my partner getting shot. This had been going to our own sniper schools, teaching sniper schools with the local agencies, learning my craft, teaching the craft, going to tactical units, working with military and law enforcement, knowing that we weren't just playing special operations soldier. We were going to actually apply this to wildlife protection, environmentally. Someday it was going to have to happen. And, I was like anybody after 9/11, how we were all affected. My thought was, that's bullshit. I want to get in the fight somehow. And if it's domestic, because I'm already embedded in a career, I'm going to do what I can to make sure the homeland at home is protected as much as I can, as a first responder, as eyes and ears, as a game warden that goes everywhere in the rural areas, because we know we have that threat here too. We know we have training groups. We have all kinds of radicalized potential. So all those skills that we were developing, a handful of us, and guys that came from military backgrounds like Frog that I mentioned before, were ideally suited to be on this team. We just didn't have a team. So when I got to start calling people the following winter,
so awesome,
and making those phone calls, and I remember the phone call to Frog specifically, and we had only worked together. We had co-taught a marijuana tactical class briefly.
Yeah.
We didn't really know each other, but we knew each other by reputation. And I said, well, bro, you're one of the first I got to call. You have extensive, special ops experience. You were a sniper. I see a sniper team being built. There's 4 of us that are already trained snipers. This is going to be dedicated. We're going to go all over the state. It's a pilot program, and it has to succeed.
He's going to be freaking out.
And he just goes, bro, dude, I became a game warden after the teams, man. I never thought I'd be an operator again. I was going to do the quiet wildlife thing. He goes, but yeah, man, I'm in. I didn't think I'd be pushing a carbine again, actively every day.
Yeah.
I went, no, we're just getting started. So we, and then I made calls to great people. Mm-hmm. The good thing about being as tenured and in the department as long as I had, and being on the committee and being an academy instructor, pretty much everybody that was still working, I was a dinosaur at this point.
You affected in some way.
Well, yeah. I knew them,
Yeah.
I'd either trained them, or I'd worked with them, or I'd FTO'd them when I was still in FTO, or I knew people that I trusted that knew them. And we had just enough guys, that upper echelon, and they were amazing, patrol wardens. I mean, all these guys were most of them were Warden of the Year. They had numerous, accolades and accommodations and awards for valor and things like that, just because of who they are.
How many people did you start with, and then is there formalized training prior to get everybody up to speed? Because you guys are becoming basically the state, SWAT team for being wardens for conducting deliberate operations.
Right. We started with 10 or 11. We had a couple alternates,
which is huge, because that's a lot of people compared. Are they backfilling the positions?
And that's the rub. That's where the grind was. There weren't enough bodies in the state to backfill warden positions, to backfill a patrol vacancy. Ooh. So in all fairness and empathizing with administrators and with squad mates, we were kind of, robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak. We were doing a mission that we felt needed to get done, and selfishly, it was an important mission, but I definitely felt badly about the thin green line getting thinner on patrol.
Yeah.
So that was a problem. Now, those backfills have happened since, and things have escalated, and grown in numbers, fortunately, especially in cannabis enforcement. But getting those guys, getting the right people, and getting to test it really made the difference, Mike. We hit the ground running. We had the military. We had Team Hawk out of Moffett Field in Mather, basically the counter-drug group, with a Black Hawk and a Pave Hawk dedicated for the summer. All these special forces guys as ground units for counter-drug that were between deployments.
Yeah.
For GWAT.
They got titled over.
Yeah, yep. And they were basically looking for an agency that wanted to go hit it every day in August and do environmental cleanup and reclamation with the big pavehawk that can lift 5,000-6,000 pounds, do anything, fly into anything hot. And Nate and I got hit with that when we were building the team. We're like, we got a lot on our plate, but what an opportunity. I mean, we're going to beg, borrow, and steal to find a blade for 3 months that we can afford to pay or contract out or borrow from other agencies. And now we got, the military's finest in America. So that was Operation Pristine, coined, and we just went crazy. Every day in August, we just went crazy. The numbers were crazy. Military worked with us. We made it all about the environment. We did press releases. We did VIP Black Hawk flights, getting them into the Silicon Valley on a grow. We, raided and babysat for a day so they could go in and actually see the plants, see the infrastructure, see the traps. And it was great.
And see the damage.
And see the damage, exactly. More than anything, they saw the damage. And so 6 weeks into a 3-month pilot program, Nate and I are driving up to the mountains where our chiefs are having their quarterly meeting. It's Mike, head honcho, and all his deputy chiefs, called assistant chiefs. And we're like, we're out of money. We're out of operating time. I mean, we need some overtime. We need some supply money. We're out of blade time. I mean, we had a month with the military and then their bird went away. And now we're just, still, we want to be successful and we're going to give everything in that 90 days. We got to that meeting and we're expecting to justify more money. And they're like, don't even go there. We've spent 2 hours having this discussion before you guys got here. We want this full time. We're like, what? Starting January 1 of next year, there will be a full-time tactical unit. You guys will have to test for your position. You got to come up with a testing protocol.
What?
Whoever's in it is leaving patrol. They're not doing any more patrol. They're working for headquarters under special operations umbrella statewide. This is how it's structured, the way you guys have built it. And I'm like, what? Okay. So Nate and I looked at each other and kind of be careful what you wish for. There was a lot of work to do in the fall when the season was over, but work we gladly did. The interview structure, the tactical scenarios we put the guys through.
So you had I love the origins of special operations unit like Delta Force, where it's, the Charlie Beckwith's guys, they had to Beckwith put himself through SAS selection, but he put his guys, they basically put themselves through their own selection in West Virginia. But it's just fascinating because you're a plank holder and you're like the original. Yeah. So you're designing everything from the ground up. So how did you go through that process of figuring out what was the best means in order to evaluate and assess your guys?
Well, fortunately for us, we knew we had most of the right people. I mean, some of the guys on the team did a great job, but it was just too much. It was too much strain on family. It was arduous for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah.
I think we lost just one from the pilot program that didn't stick through to the full-time testing. And then because it was so successful, we had a lot of guys that really were skilled to do it, but they wanted to kind of see what the pilot program would do, and they didn't get initially selected because I could pick only so many people, and there were a lot of great people. And, honestly, there were those things where he'd be a great candidate, but I just haven't worked enough with him. And, I haven't seen enough of this or, between all of us making those selections for the pilot program, but everybody could come back and test. And then we had a ranking score, a very, very stringent selection and ranking on an interview, on a PT scenario involving a grow scenario and how you handle it, and a mock-up. And then we knew all these guys could shoot. We knew they were all great at defensive tactics. I mean, they're all really good at that stuff, and we're going to get into that. That's a given.
Yeah.
But we needed to get that core. You're thinking on an arduous op when you're by yourself. You're talking to an evaluator as you're working through a grow site and articulating exactly how you would logistically go through operational planning, how you'd implement it, how you'd follow up, what your contingencies would be. So we want to see that you can think as a team leader, as a one-man guy, about what you're doing for the whole team. And you guys, and I really like how you and Mike Ritland talked about this, the individual rock star operator, but having the right complement mentally and emotionally to be all about the team, kind of the Bill Belichick style in the in the NFL, that I have a lot of rock stars, but we're not going to make anybody a rock star.
Yeah.
We are a team, team first. And I had great guys, super blessed. And when I got everybody selected, we had a great first year in 2014. I did have 2 guys on the team, though, amazing operators, both canine guys, or one was a canine, one was about to be a canine guy. And it was becoming individualistic. There was some divisiveness. It was, there was kind of a separation within the team, and there was pushback, and it just wasn't working out. And we had to let 2 guys go from the team. And that was hard.
Yeah.
That was the first time I ever let anybody go from anything I'd ever worked on, you know, and that was the first time in the agency that had ever happened. And this was the type of team where it wasn't a discipline thing. It was, you know, admin, it was you're on or you're off. If you need to leave to go back to patrol, you can go back to your patrol spot. We left those open because we knew the demands that Met would require. On the same token, we don't have to go through a disciplinary process if it's not working out for you on the team, for the whole of the agency. You're not going to be disciplined.
It's a volunteer thing. You're volunteering.
You're just going to go back to patrol. But obviously they wanted to stay on the team. They just, you know, it was one of those things that had to go the way they wanted it to go. And it just wasn't good for the team.
Yeah.
Great operators, and they went to other team and they did a great job. But once we got through that hurdle, all of those same people are still on the team. I mean, and I had it for 6 years.
Wow.
And Nate and I, you know, we figured, knowing special operations backgrounds personally and with military guys like you, that, you know, 2-3 years running at that pace, probably not going to stay on the team when they can go to a patrol assignment, but everyone stayed, you know, and the people that have left have promoted or retired like me. And we brought in a couple of new guys. Actually, we've got 4 new Met members in 6 years to fill all the positions, which it's a real testament to the guys we got. We got so lucky, man.
Yeah.
These guys work their asses off. You know, they work for each other. They're all about the team. You know, and I honestly I know the best of the best, just like guys you worked with. They're a very rare breed, but to be as loyal as they are and as selfless as they are, and as humble, you know, was just really and inspiring to me too, you know, and just kept me going. So right up until the end, that was the hard part to leave. You talk about the transition. I'm around a lot of good people like yourself with that background, that there's a lot of honor, a lot of love and respect. But in day-to-day business, as you know, in the world of social media and product and training, we don't just work with, you know, those team members that are in our circle. And I miss those guys. I always will.
I think it's really unique that you got to operate, standing up that team and then operating with them for such an extended period of time.
Yeah, it was awesome.
The institutional continuity that you develop, you can't replace that. And then the fact that you're in sync, you're retaining the same talent, and then you're continuing to learn lessons as you go. How does the operational tempo start to evolve itself? Are you guys doing your first successful missions? And then what is the specific mission now? Are you running unilaterally as a team, not depending on sheriff's departments and everything else? You're just doing it yourself.
That's it, exactly. Now what we're doing is we're going out with the right guys, the right support, the right toys and tools, without boundaries, and we're really kind of doing it our way. And our plan was, every guy is in a different part of the state that's on the team, and every guy from an operator level outside of supervision is responsible for however many counties, to where all 50 plus counties of California are covered. So they're generating work. They're talking to Forest Service, LEO, allies, BLM, park rangers, sheriff's deputies, DEA, whoever. And we're not just doing our own missions. We might jump in with Stanislaus County and co-lead it, but it's going to be our whole unit or part of our unit lending an element. We made kind of an informal rule that we would work primarily and eventually only with agencies that would, you know, go for adequate apprehension effort, or let us do that if they contained a perimeter. Let us go in and be the hunters, because we're good at it. We got some great dogs. They developed for years to get there. Everyone hunts hard, you know, stalking, FieldCraft, camouflage, noise discipline, trail movement. That's kind of one of our fortes. We spent a lot of years getting there, but they needed to reclimate. We needed it. If we're going to work with other agencies, we said, guys, you got to meet us halfway. We'll be out there until we're dead on our feet.
Ooh, I like that.
But you got to do the cleanup. And if you talk to other SWAT teams,
most of them don't.
They don't want to do it. They're like, dude, we're not trash collectors. That's beneath us. I said, well, do you like the environment? Do you fish? Yeah, a little bit. Do you hike a trail with your kids? Yeah. Well, dude, I mean, think of what you're paying forward. You just got this guy. You just got to deploy your SWAT team way into the backcountry. Go hands-on, catch the most violent domestic criminal, if not one of the most violent domestic criminal you ever have, and then you get to go restore a creek. And yeah, it's kind of dirty, It's the dirty part of the job, but just think how much good you did that you can tell your kids, your grandkids, or whoever.
I hate that you have to sell it.
Oh, well, we do, and I mean, it's so funny because like Marcos and my other, and Shang now, who's the new lieutenant and replaced me as the lieutenant of the team, a great guy, one of our snipers, and and they're constantly going, yeah, this team doesn't really want to do the cleanup, but at least we can get the raid done, then we can come back in later. And I'm just like, I'm kind of the hard ass. I'm like, that's bullshit. You know? We're not going to play, but of course we're going to play.
Yeah.
And we got to get the job done, and we're going to always keep friends. And there's a little bit of there's a little bit of hazing going on there, a little bit of guilt, tripping, but eventually, if you're out there and that team's just standing by on perimeter and they've done their thing, that SWAT unit, and you've gone in and had a dog bite, and you've been Western, you've been running an MBG since 3 a.m.
They're pumped up,
and then we're cleaning up, and they're standing there. It's like, yeah, my guys will say, this thing ain't going to clean itself up.
Yeah.
They're like, man.
Okay, I'm here anyway.
I'm here. I can't do this. I look lazy. And they've been working there. In all fairness, we're all tired. They've worked their ass off. They don't have to do that. It's a conservation agency's mandate. I get that. But but we're getting them in. We're getting them in.
This whole reclamation thing is just blowing my mind because I think it's, to me, when I always told my assaulters or my special operations guys that when we hit the target and we're objective secure in a minute, that's not when it's over. That's not when your helmet comes off and you're done, because we still have SSE. We still have to do sensitive site exploitation.
Right. We
have to do biometrics. We have to work the tactical interrogations.
Yeah.
And it's a cycle, because all the stuff that we complete or pull off this objective lends itself back to more information, intelligence, operations, etc. And when I think of this reclamation, it's like a good way to put it to rest, because you got shitheads on the objective, they're destroying the environment,
right?
And then you go over there, you wrap them up, and then you have the opportunity to restore the environment back to its original place, the right place for conservation in mind. And I don't know, that cycle seems very satisfying to me when I think about you guys as mission tenant.
It absolutely, and that's a good way to say it. I've never looked at it. You've gone full circle. You kind of put a stake in the ground. You climb the top of the mountain. You can't go any higher, and it's a great feeling. And we'll go in, and most missions I'll take a before, after we've chased the bad guys around, caught them, done what we've done. I'll take a before, all those evidence photos of the vapor trail of waste, and then I'll take an after, when it's just the banks are clean, all that stuff's out, that last, helo net load of crap is out.
Yeah.
It feels freaking really good. It does. It's I've never felt more satisfied in a complete way environmentally, to be part of the Thin Green Line and do that. One thing though, we talk about the budget and we talk about the lack of funds, and even with all this support logistically, right, with, admin coming in with money, some DCEP money, Met burns through a lot of money, especially on the reclamation front.
Yeah.
And getting other groups like NGOs to support that, and organizations like it's called CalWAF. It's the California Wildlife Officers Foundation.
Mm-hmm. And
these are all conservationists, and like Nancy, our retired chief, is on the board, and they've come together. They've brought in a lot of their own money, and basically funded from outside sources to be that buffer to get us money for a new canine, or if a canine's injured, or canine equipment, or give us operational funds. They were instrumental when I didn't have a budget, before we didn't have more budget coming in, buying our first MVG sets, especially night vision for my sniper rifles.
Yeah.
We had to have MVG capability and starlight engagement for our quals, and for most of our sniper deployments were at night, getting in or out, or covering at night. So that was new, that was big for us, and they allowed that thing. So, big shout out to those guys and organizations like them.
Oh, I want to get involved in that. We do nonprofit work. We donated almost $50,000 last year to nonprofits.
Wow.
And I'd love to be involved in that and raising money to support that, because I think that's, with the CBD thing, the Wildlands Hemp Company that we own, and giving back, I think that'd be a good revenue. That would be a good stream to support you guys and doing it. That would be
huge.
And then even just raising awareness, because it's so important. But when I think about being somebody who wants to give back, it's like what way can you optimize that in giving back the most? And I think this whole thing that you're talking about, and the reclamation and the repairing of our wildlands, that's the way to do it, because you guys do it. You deal with it direct.
Yeah.
It's not like it's passive. You're not paying somebody to somehow, where you don't find out, deal with the environment and repair the environment. This is directly affecting the environment. And, just when I think about just raising money, like, hey guys, we're going to raise money to provide this specific type of equipment for the reclamation of these lands, and seeing that, oh man, that'd be satisfying. That's
it's
awesome.
huge. No, man, and bless you for doing that. CalWAF is a great place to start, where it's all started in California, where the majority of it happens with the cartel, and then the group I'm a part of on the board, Crop, which is a national group. They're going to hit not only California on public lands, but they're going to also hit the other states too. So it's kind of like, I'm kind of torn, knowing how heavy the magnitude of the problem is in California. Really, that's where a lot of funding needs to go, because that's where the reclamation is going to have the biggest dent right now. But we can't forget about the lesser states that are having it to a lesser extent. So it's kind of like and now I'm part of Crop, and of course I still support and keep in touch with and promote with Reach now, thanks to guys like you and listening. And thank you so much for this. This is helping CalWAF say, yeah, we're involved, we're out there, guys. Look at, we have money and a handful of people on the board, but we don't have a big reach. We don't have a big Instagram following, things like that. Nor does Crop. So, I look at groups like that aren't on the radar, but guys like you and me as patriots, with our backgrounds,
trying to get back,
and we're wilderness guys. It's kind of cool, and so a little bit goes a long way. But those are good points.
Yeah, we'll figure out the path, because I think there's we got to figure out a channel to be able to put this out and get people more involved.
Get people in our community kind of involved.
Yeah.
I like your plan,
So
great.
Talk to me about the national version of this, because is this just California specific, and who, if anybody, has fallen suit in other states?
So what's happening right now is, unfortunately, it's just California that's got...
What?
Yeah, just has this team on the Game Warden front. And that's... Game Wardens being special operators at this level, you just don't see that.
But that's surprising. No other states are like... Is that because of it's just so new?
It's not... I need to qualify that. It's not... there's no other states doing it specifically for this mission.
Yeah.
But Florida has SOG units, special operation groups, that are everything from, waterborne safety and, crisis, hurricane response, fugitive tracking. They could very easily jump into a mission like this in a day if they had more of that problem. Texas has specialized units. California, Texas, and Florida, generally speaking, are the more progressive, better funded, more diverse conservation agencies, because one, they have the problem, and two, they have resources to get to something like we built. But other little states that don't have a lot of wardens but have a lot of capable guys that want to do the job, they just don't have the infrastructure yet, or the support, not only personnel wise but logistically and financially. And that's where all this outreach and education I'm doing, like through this talk we're having today, is bringing some attention to that, and that they need help there too.
So these other states have kind of, is it hodgepodge put together stuff, or is it organized and called special operations something else? Is it like a different version of you guys? Because I feel like you guys set the standard, and like other states could use that lesson learned and model as an example of how to stand up their own versions of this.
Yeah, that's certainly what we're trying to lend out there, is whatever we've learned, we want to share, obviously. And we focus on, the cartel, tainted cannabis issue, but we're a team to handle anything. It'd be fugitive recovery, high-risk entry, warrant support, sniper overwatch. Hazmat. We've been roped into doing a lot of stuff, outside of just that. But that's the mission that keeps you hot, keeps you sharp, because we do so many of them every year. Florida has amazing SOG units that do a little bit different. They don't target that because they don't have that problem as much that we do with tainted cannabis cartel grows. But, disaster response after Hurricane Katrina, after 9/11, all of those things. Texas being so close to the border, having cartel issues there with their specialized teams. And then certainly I keep in touch with all those guys. We share information. I'm looking to do some stuff with Florida, some co-training development, or get them back allied with the Met team back in California, the guys that are running it behind me now, and also doing some stuff in Texas, just to it's amazing how much we have in common that we're not quite prepared for, but we could learn that little tidbit, that little caveat that one team brings to the other, that just makes us safer and more efficient and more effective in any state.
Is there a conference or something that you guys go to? A national conference?
There is. I'm glad you mentioned that. There's several. There's an International Crime Stoppers conference that I spoke at right literally a couple days before my time on Mic Drop with our mutual friend Mike Ritland. And that was all chiefs. It was like 45 chiefs, including my chief, David Bess, that's now the chief behind Mike, that was supporting and helping develop the cannabis program that's really blossomed since I retired.
Yeah.
And telling all those guys this story and showing them a PowerPoint and telling them the stories and the growing pains of how Met was formed and what's out there. I've never seen chiefs so fired up. I mean, they stood up. It was a standing ovation. They were like high-fiving each other. This is what we need to be about. That's legitimate game warden work, man. That's bigger, more significant. It's hitting us harder environmentally, and we're dealing with it on a lesser scale. Can you come help us? So yeah, I'm getting pulled out to those states, speaking to them, showing them our protocol, if you will, what to look for if they can build a team, and at least if they can't build a team, getting them some resources and contacts of where to reach out to try to get something going. The NOWIA, the National Wildlife Officers annual convention that moves around state by state, I'm going to speak at that again this year and have a whole long embedded, more specific law enforcement class, several hours on officer-involved shooting debriefs, PTSD, protocol, logistics, mental preparation, team selection, all those things we kind of learned the hard way, over that 10, 15-year period.
Yeah.
So I'm doing everything I can nationally, and that's what's beautiful about Phase 2, Mike, is definitely showing what we built in California with some pride. Very honored that I was and so blessed to be part of that with that agency. But looking at it, more at a 30,000 foot view now on a macro level versus just thinking about what I need, to do within my home state.
Yeah.
And it's amazing when people start communicating, how much more pervasive this problem is than we think. So, it's not slowing down, and I'm glad I'll be overwhelmed and happy being overwhelmed on the teaching and speaking and tactical training front for a long time, I hope.
Yeah, I think it's so important how you lay that out, because you need consultants from an outside perspective to come in,
right,
using their experiences, acting as subject matter experts, but coming from a perspective that's not, bureaucratically affiliated or politically affiliated or institutionally affiliated, and giving the ground truth and saying, hey, here's the data, here's the experiences, here's what we're running into, and here are ways that we fix the problem. I think that's so important, man. It's really cool to see you do it from this perspective, because you're an operational guy. You're not like a suit who somehow figured out a way, and you're coming back trying to tell the operational guys how to stand up.
Yeah.
You're an ops guy who came into a position where you're in now, acting as a consultant from a 30,000 feet perspective, and you're giving new insight. And I think all the the entire United States and all the fish and game, fish and wildlife, whatever you want to call it, need to be tied into this, because that's how you adapt and evolve.
Absolutely.
That's the only way that they're going to grow, right?
No, and that's perfectly said. And that's really how we're going to affect it nationally, right? We're not going to affect it being in our little fiefdoms of our states and just kind of developing our own thing in one state, and not really, letting the cat out of the bag. And, we hear about these special operation stories of one team from one branch and another team from another branch not communicating on the same op.
Yeah.
I've heard it 100 times, from brothers like you. And we don't want to do that. We never wanted to do that. And that's one of the things that I like about how we were built. I already had kind of an outreach presence anyway going into this thing as an operational guy. So knowing that we were going to tell the story as much as we were going to live the story was just as important, and maybe sometimes even more important, because had we not done that, these other states wouldn't be reaching out. They'd be floundering with the issue and probably more ill-equipped from a resource standpoint than we were in the beginning. And we got an officer almost killed. We didn't have that happen. Maybe that's phrased wrong, but that was a very bad contingency that happened from our involvement in an early day. By the good graces, he survived and has become an amazing game warden, now a lieutenant, but I don't want to see that happen to any other group, and I want to be part of preventing that for any other agency domestically, whether they're in the thin green line of conservation officers or not, from ever, having that happen. And I'm having a lot of narcotics teams outside of conservation agencies reaching out to do presentations and do some training. And that's cool, because they're going to see the environmental component.
Yeah.
There's a lot more, conservation, kind of loving wildlife, wanting to protect all those resources outside of the game warden contingency that I'm finding nationally and in our military. Most of us, you guys in special forces in all branches, come from that outdoor background.
Oh yeah.
Love your fishing, love your hunting, love your open spaces, right? The woods are our church, not mine. They're our church.
Yeah.
And so, we got a lot we can do with that message, and benefit the country, not just the state.
Yeah. I just want to get more involved in that. I feel deeply compassionate and passionate about somehow trying to be involved in something like that. It reminds me of the human trafficking problem, right?
Right.
Where it's just you're dealing with human lives, the most innocent parts of our society that we need to protect, and you just, as a survival primal instinct, want to do something about it. It's the same thing I think about when I think about conservation of land and our natural habitats. And what you've done with the book and how you're doing it, man. Many people could not do the way you're doing it so eloquently, because you have to maintain a balance, right? You have to be very careful, but telling the truth and the truth as it sits tells the story. You don't even have to do any deviation politically or anything. Just the truth is enough for people to get more vested and involved.
Yeah,
I love it, man. How do people find all the things that you guys are doing, and what's the future look like next?
Well, first of all, thank you for that compliment. That's a huge honor coming from you. I'm very blessed to do what I do, and I had an amazing career, a real blessed career, a lot of close calls, but I wouldn't have changed any of it for the world, to get to this point. Never saw it coming, To get a hold of me, I'm on Instagram like everybody else. I'm just John Noress, JOHNNORES, one word. Direct message me if you have questions about the issue, you want training, you want a speaking presentation, or know more about this, because I'm all over the country doing that. My email or my website, basically johnnoress.com, gets you to my email if you want anything further. Like you guys, I still teach and mentor on carbine, pistol, precision rifle, but to a very, very small group when I have time. And I limit it to very few students, and they're vetted civilians typically, some military, some law enforcement, mostly in Montana now. I love to just get back on the gun and train and teach. And now I'm speaking more than I'm physically teaching, and I don't want to lose that.
It's a weird transition.
It's a weird transition, but again, it's getting to more people.
Yeah,
but
it's necessary.
Selfishly, I love teaching sniper schools with my, with that sheriff's military crew in California and some of that. But yeah, just reach me on Instagram. Reach me up on the website if you want anything like this. I do offer. People really want signed copies, personalized copies of the book.
Yeah, thank you for buying it, by the way.
Oh, absolutely, man.
This is awesome.
Thank you for diving into it. And the way we go about doing that, if I'm not going to be in your state for a while, just direct message me. I will ship them as long as someone covers minimal shipping. I'll personalize both books, get them out. We do a PayPal thing, and we'll make that happen. Got a signature knife coming out here in a couple of weeks. Little folder by V Knives. Mike Vellicamp of V Knives collaborated
really cool.
with me. Yeah, it's the thin green line Trailblazer.
Nice.
My call sign, but it's that little folder that has every tool that any one knife never had when I was operational.
Yeah.
A glass breaker, an emergency webbing cutter, a lanyard loop, an impact tool, and a nice battle blade on it that everybody can carry. So a lot of people have inquired on that as I've made some announcements, and that'll certainly be available.
That's going to be on the site, the website?
That'll be on the website, and it'll be up on Instagram, yeah, and it'll be available through the factory as well. But I'll personalize those copies too if anybody wants a blade, and get a hold of me, either of those mediums, and we'll connect.
Awesome, man. John, the author of Hidden War: How Special Operations Game Wardens Are Reclaiming America's Wildlands from the Drug Cartels. Thank you so much, man, for coming on the podcast.
Total honor, brother. Thanks for having me.